Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
Today we're going to hear about a little-known case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, a case that changed the way we address each other in our courts of law, a case that challenged a pervasive pattern of disrespect.
If you can't treat us with respect, get out of my jail cell. Talk to a lady.
That voice you heard, that's Mary Hamilton, and we've got NPR's Camilla Domonoske in the studio to help us tell her story. She's a reporter with the Two-Way blog at NPR, where she covers breaking news. Hey, Camilla.
Hey.
What's good?
I'm all right. How are y'all?
Good. I'm excited to hear this story because you pitched it to us a few months ago by saying it was so much bigger than the word miss.
Yeah, and to understand why that little word, that honorific, mattered so much to Mary Hamilton, you first have to understand who she was.
Okay.
So she passed away in 2002. Like you said, she was a black woman working in the South, but she grew up in Iowa and Colorado in the 40s and the 50s. Some members of her family passed as white, but Mary refused, even when it meant defying her father. Here's her daughter, Holly Wesley.
She was disgusted by the idea that people would pass, that they would deny any part of who they are. And she identified strongly with being black.
Mary Hamilton wasn't always an activist. For a while, she thought she was actually going to be a nun. Then, when she was in college, she discovered socialism.
As one does.
As one does. She dropped out of college, became a teacher, and then, as she was a teacher, she heard about the work that was being done in the South as part of the civil rights movement. Now, like we said, Mary Hamilton died in 2002, but we know how she felt in that moment when she first heard about this because she recorded these oral histories with her friend and former roommate, Sheila Michaels. Sheila was a white woman who recorded hours and hours of tape of the two women talking to each other.
Who's the mayor of D.C. who got into all that trouble?
Marion.
Marion Barry. Yeah, he used to party at our... We learned how to do the twist from Marion.
We did not.
I love this tape. It's so obvious that they were really close.
Yeah, they were lifelong friends. I mean, they recorded these tapes in the late 90s, but they were roommates back in the early 60s when they were both activists in the civil rights movement. So, like I was saying, Mary Hamilton knew she was going to be an activist as soon as she heard about the burgeoning movement.
It's happening. We're finally fighting back. We're going to fight back. We're fighting back. We're not going to take it anymore. And I wanted to just quit and run and join. And I didn't know where I'd run to. I didn't know where I would join.
So Mary left her job and joined the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE.
So a quick explanatory comment here. CORE was one of the big 6 civil rights groups in the 50s and 60s, along with like the National Urban League and the NAACP.
SNCC. Was SNCC one of them?
Yep. The Southern Christian Leadership Convention, which was Martin Luther King's group.
SCLC.
Yep, right. And so CORE today is known as a kind of conservative group, but back in the day, they were like super about it. And they were the people behind the freedom rides.
Yeah, Mary Hamilton was a freedom rider.
We were freedom riders.
And what was the training? The training was getting into a fetal position.
How to get beat up and not hit back.
Yeah,
That's what it really amounted to. And you have to understand, we were very nervous because we didn't know what to expect. This was right after the bus burning.
In the years that followed, she was organizing, she registered voters, she raised money. So she would drive her white Plymouth Valiant down these rural roads to new towns in the Deep South to organize from scratch, to start new core chapters, which meant a lot of glad-handing, a lot of sweet talking.
Right.
And then there would be protests with nonviolent resistance. And that didn't necessarily come naturally to her. Her first impulse was to fight back. Her daughter Holly says that other activists called Mary red.
And not because of her hair, but because of her temper. So for a nonviolent movement, my mother was one who would get angry, aggravated, and I don't know if I can say, but pissed off.
She had to learn how to keep her cool.
We had to practice nonviolence because if we didn't, we'd get the shit kicked out of us.
Right.
There were dangers everywhere. Police brutality, dogs, sadistic jailers, beatings, the KKK.
And she was a woman, and we know that comes with its own set of difficulties.
Yeah. I mean, not only was Mary Hamilton locked up with accused killers, she was also at the same time fighting off officials in the jails who insisted that they needed vaginal and anal examinations. She stared down jailers who she suspected of plans to rape her.
I said, you have to kill me first. I will not be raped. Of course, I never thought what I would do if, I was in a position and I couldn't budge. I'd just pray to die. Dear Father, just take me. Take me on to heaven. Don't let me be raped. But, I mean, I really meant it. You have to kill me first.
She was beaten repeatedly.
But that was the jail cell where they threw me on the elevator and ran the elevator up and down and beat me on the elevator. Yeah. They threw it up and down. Then said, scream, scream, so... nobody can hear you, bitch. Scream, scream. And just out of sheer meanness, spite, I wouldn't scream.
Yeah.
I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I didn't scream at all.
Ugh. It's so hard to hear how matter-of-factly she talks about these traumatic events.
Yeah, you can kind of tell how just pervasive it was. And I mean, she wasn't just fighting racism from outside the movement. She was fighting sexism within the movement at the same time. Mary told Sheila about a lot of sexual harassment from other activists.
Which is a topic that feels very relevant right now.
Yep. At one point, a drunken member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was sprawled on Mary Hamilton's bed, insisting that he loved her. She told Sheila she tried to laugh it off, but he wouldn't leave. So she called for backup.
Well, honey, I got on the phone and called Dr. King and said, Dr. King, please come and get Bernard out of here. And do you know, he got in the phone because somebody else who was in the room told me what Dr. King had said. Now, Bernard, you get out of that room and you leave that little girl alone. Dr. King used to call me that little girl.
That Dr. King, of course, is the Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right?
Yep. And as it happens, Dr. King later hit on her, too. At a conference in Memphis, Mary Hamilton said she was totally shocked. She fled his hotel room and wound up sitting at a train station in the dark alone for hours just to get away from the situation. Yeah. And I mean, those weren't the only instances. Somebody started a rumor that she and Sheila were lesbian lovers after she turned him down. There were other examples of men behaving in predatory ways. Anyway, Mary Hamilton met all these kinds of situations with a constant sort of defiance, and that fueled her activism, and it also brings us back to that word miss. M-I-S-S.
Miss, which is the honorific for single women, and Mrs. is for married women.
Yep. And me personally, I'd rather go by Ms., spelled M-S, which doesn't say whether you're married.
But that was barely used in 1963, so.
Yep. As it happens, Mary's a part of the story about how that became an option too, but we're not there yet. So suffice to say that in the 1960s, Ms. was not an option. And for Mary Hamilton, Miss wasn't even an option.
M-I-S-S.
M-I-S-S.
Because she was black.
Exactly.
So this is the South, right? It's the 60s. White people, especially in positions of authority, would not use honorifics for black people. That's why you get grown-ass black men being called boy and black women being called girl, or they get called slurs. And even if they did use a name, it wouldn't be Miss Hamilton. They would just call Mary Hamilton by her first name. They would just say Mary, no matter how old she was, no matter who was talking to her.
No matter how formal the context was, and no matter how white women were being addressed around her.
Right.
So I talked to Barbara McCaskill. She's an English professor at the University of Georgia. She's studied Black American narratives. She's studied narratives of the Civil Rights Movement. And her own mother vividly remembered not being called Miss.
Segregation was in the details as much as it was in the bold strokes. The idea was to remind African Americans and people of color in general, in every possible way, that we were inferior, that we were not capable, to drill that notion into our heads. And language becomes a very powerful force to do that.
I was just thinking about the post-Civil War period, all these black folks in the South, these newly emancipated black people who are giving their sons and daughters names that are honorifics, right? So if white people are going to call them their names, like if you name your son Mr. or Colonel or Master, right, then the white person addressing your son has to say Mr. And it's crazy to think about people resisting in the nomenclature. Like, you had to resist and fight at every front you could. And your name was a site of resistance, which is crazy.
Yeah. Generations later, Mary Hamilton is facing the exact same thing all over the South. People refusing to address her as respectfully as they addressed white people.
Right.
And she was resisting, too. There's this moment really early in her activism in Lebanon, Tennessee, when she's arrested for illegal picketing. And the town mayor walks into her jail cell and sort of condescendingly addresses all the women in there by their first names.
And you said...
By the time Mary and Sheila were talking about this, Mary actually didn't remember this time in jail, and Sheila was jogging her memory.
You said, we are Mrs. Anderson and Miss Hamilton and Mrs. Jones, and if you don't know how to speak to a lady, then get out of my cell. Oh, that is funny. And then you said, and this place is a pigsty. Oh, yeah, that is such a filthy jail.
Because that was quoted in the papers. Been in a lot of jails in my life, but nothing as filthy as this one.
And I said, what did he do? And you said he left.
He left. Get out of my jail cell. If you can't treat us with respect, get out of my jail cell.
Talk to a lady.
All right, Camilla, where we at?
We're in Gadsden, Alabama. It's 1963. Mary Hamilton is protesting again. She's arrested again. And the authorities refuse to call her Miss again. Mary's daughter, Holly, told me about what happened when her mother arrived in that courtroom to stand before the judge.
The attorney for the state of Alabama, it's very simple, said, Mary, what are you here for? And my mother responded with, I will not answer you until you call me Miss Hamilton.
I am just trying to put myself in her shoes and imagine how intimidating that must have been.
Right.
And what a strong woman she is.
And remember that Mary Hamilton is not from the South. She grew up in the North, in the Midwest, in the West. And her family had at times passed as white. They had an Italian surname that she later dropped. So she knew what it was like to be treated as a white woman versus as a black woman from personal experience as a woman who had walked on both sides of that color line before claiming her black identity.
Damn.
Here's how Mary Hamilton remembered that moment with that judge.
And the judge was sitting in this big chair that looked like it was swallowing him, because he was a little man. And he had his foot up on the desk, beautiful hand-carved mahogany desk, and his little old tiny runt of a skunk. And he's going, wouldn't you make a nice little heifer in my kitchen? Oh, my Lord, when they hit him! Oh. One of the lawyers, who was a real young kid, he grabbed me. he said, I thought you were going to jump over that desk at him. But I remember seeing red.
The judge ordered her to apologize. Her lawyer told her very quietly that she didn't have to. Mary told Sheila that in that moment she needed that.
I needed the strength of another human being to know that I was right. You know, I mean, I knew I was right, but... You know.
So did she apologize?
She did not. So she was sentenced to a few days in jail for contempt of court and hit with a $50 fine.
That's a lot of money back then.
So her lawyers challenged the fine and imprisonment as unlawful because the prosecutor had been violating her constitutional rights by treating her differently than he treated white witnesses.
Treating her differently because he wouldn't call her miss.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because he called white women miss but would not do the same for her. That case, Hamilton v. Alabama, was appealed and eventually made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, which ruled unanimously without even calling for oral arguments. They basically said, this one is pretty obvious. Alabama is wrong. You cannot call black people and only black people by their first names in court. That's discriminatory. And the precedent from that case stands to this day. I mean, there haven't been a ton of stories that are written about this case, but there was one on NPR a few years ago by Andrew Yeager, a reporter in Alabama, and he spoke to law students who were taught to use honorifics for everybody in court.
That's crazy.
All around the world.
World nigga law.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle together outside London's Kensington Palace. The 36-year-old actress brings a touch of the 21st century to Britain's royal family. She's an American who describes herself as mixed race, which came under scrutiny in media coverage of their relationship.
And some of that scrutiny, and you ended up making a very public statement about it, some of that scrutiny was centred around your ethnicity, Meghan. When you realised that, what did you think?
Of course, it's disheartening. You know, it's a shame that that is the climate in this world, to focus that much on that, or that would be discriminatory in that sense. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, I'm really just proud of who I am and where I come from, and we have never put any focus on that. We've just focused on who we are as a couple. And so when you take all those extra layers away and all of that noise, I think it makes it really easy to just enjoy being together and tune all the rest of that out.
It was in September 2016 that they made their first public appearance, a sports event for wounded veterans. Later, Prince Harry was incensed by the press coverage of their relationship. His office issued an unprecedented rebuke. His girlfriend Meghan Markle has been subjected to a wave of abuse and harassment, a smear on the front page of a national newspaper. The racial undertones of comment pieces and the outright sexism and racism of social media trolls. This is not a game. It is her life and his. Prince Harry, who's fifth in line to the throne, sought permission from the Queen to marry.
This is a royal family, led from the top, that moves with the times, and so do its members. And Harry's a modern guy. He's a guy who's grown up in the modern world. He wants to do things his way. He's not bound by tradition. He's following his heart as opposed to any form of protocol that people think he should marry.
The world's media had set up outside Kensington Palace, but on the streets of London, news of the engagement was greeted with a mixture of delight and disinterest.
Marriage is very nice. Congratulations to them. Right time to get married in the spring.
What do you think? Not much, to be honest. No.
Don't care?
No, not really. Not particularly.
Well done, Harry.
This engagement speaks volumes about how the royal family has changed. An American actress of mixed race will become a duchess. Unthinkable, even a few years ago. Peter Sharp, Al Jazeera in London.
Oh, yeah, the Americans love everything royal. Obviously, they're split into the two camps, that people just love a wedding and love all that stuff. And then there's obviously the racist trollery that's happening, because obviously she's black or mixed race or what. But, there's always an undercurrent of racism, but it's more outward in America, not so much in England. In England, they like to use sort of dog whistling terms like exotic. She's not exotic. She's American. Black people have been in America for centuries due to people theft. She's not exotic. She's not from a tribe in the Amazon. She's American. I'd say that she's the first acknowledged person of colour in the royal family, because I don't know if some people know, but wasn't Queen Charlotte Sophia, Queen Victoria's grandmother, wasn't she supposedly mulatto? I don't know.
She was descended from Portuguese Moors, I believe, but never really acknowledged, as you say.
Exactly.
But what I want to know is
the African,
Meghan Markle,
the African Portuguese side of the royal family, which was never really acknowledged.
I can see what the Daily Show is going to be like later in the week.
It's a fantastic thing.
You've given us an exclusive preview.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine being trolled horribly on Twitter for this. But, you know, she's the first acknowledged person of colour, and I think that's a wonderful thing. But I don't think it's a massive step forward. It's the royal family stepping into the future, which is awesome, but it's not like he's trying to marry Lupita or Serena Williams. It's very acceptable.
Gina,
it's the undercurrent of subtle racism in the UK, where they use these terms that they don't deem as racist, but they are. It's just another way of saying she's black. She's not one of us. She's dusky. She's exotic. She's dark. She's. Somebody even wrote something about thickening the royal blood with her exotic blood. I mean, come on.
So, I want to introduce you guys to someone. This is my Bitmoji. She's the little cartoon avatar that I designed to look like me and dress like me, and now I outsource my emotions to her online.
Internet with Amanda Hess. All images sourced from the internet.
The internet can be a place that's devoid of affect. So now all these little patches have popped up to help us express how we feel. Emojis, text formatting, and animated GIFs, which allow us to summon other people to feel our feelings for us. And that can get really complicated. Women of color in particular are called on really frequently to express emotions for us. From this unknown woman clapping in the Wendy Williams audience, to Oprah, who has transcended the role of talk show host to become the queen of reaction GIFs.
This is the joy for me.
According to Giphy, the most popular way for Americans to express happiness is this. And sadness, this. These GIFs are not just popular in online Black communities. White people use them too. Maybe too much. And there's a term for that. Digital blackface. As Lauren Michelle Jackson wrote in Teen Vogue,
digital blackface is the act of inhabiting a Black persona, employing digital technology to co-opt a perceived cachet or Black cool.
So, for example, Meghan McCain said,
I think at this point we need to ask whether or not Black Lives Matter is a hate group.
But she's constantly using Black lives as a digital accessory to express how she feels about, like, Republican politics. On the internet, white people outsource their emotional labor to Black people.
Where your sass, your nonchalance, your fury, your delight, your annoyance, your happy dance, your diva, your shade, your yes moments.
And my Bitmoji is complicit too. Bitmoji takes all of these Black emotional reactions and verbal expressions and designs them to fit my white body and face.
We gon' live together.
This is the kind of appropriation that makes most white people look real dumb when they try to pull it off in the context of their real lives.
Homeboys gonna get it.
Manuel Arturo Abreu calls this phenomenon online imagined Black English. And you can trace it back to the earliest days of the social web. There used to be a tool called the Jive filter that would translate white people's speech into Jive as a kind of gross curiosity. These days, imagined Black English is now being appropriated on Twitter by actual white nationalists. Whiteness is enacted in GIFs too, but it's suspect that Black people are overrepresented in these kinds of cultural artifacts, but underrepresented in the seats of power that actually mold the world. The way that Black people are turned into products online is rarely interested in their full humanity. Take the phenomenon of Black neighbor memes.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
As Slate's Aisha Harris puts it,
it's difficult to watch these videos and not sense that their popularity has something to do with a persistent, if unconscious, desire to see Black people perform.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I'm talking with Charles Ramsey. He's a neighbor.
Especially in the case of something like the Cleveland kidnapper.
And she says, help me get out. I've been in here a long time.
That was a very serious issue that was distilled into just buffoonery.
My neighbor got big testicles because we see this dude every day.
Scholar C.N. Nye uses the term animatedness to describe the tendency to think of Black people that way. A tendency that's only exacerbated by the form of the animated GIF. None of this means that white people should only use white people GIFs and Black people should only use Black people GIFs, but it does mean that even something as seemingly simple as trying to express happiness on the internet is complicated by structural racism. That old structure keeps encoding itself into new technologies. But those same technologies can be used to create different images.
Nobody's coming to take your gifts away. Ultimately, the point is to just be a little bit more aware, a little bit more cognizant of the way in which you're sharing images that feature Black people or feature people of color?
Well, Haiti is on the list of what's supposed to be. Haiti, the people who are called Haitians, predominantly are people who are classified as non-white, but they're not supposed to ever have anything under the system of white supremacy except punishment for being arrogant enough under Toussaint to think that you, with your military skills, can take us over or tell us what to do. So many a historian has said that the reason Haiti is in the shape that it's in now, and sort of like the head wagon people of the world, you might say, everybody kind of looks on them with great pity, it's because the white supremacists made that decision.
Now, Brooklyn City Councilman Jumaane Williams. His district has more Haitians than any other in the city. In fact, he says it's the largest block of Haitians in the United States outside of Florida. And he led a march last week to oppose the Trump administration's plan to end a temporary legal immigration status granted to about 60,000 Haitians who were already in the U.S. when that devastating earthquake struck Haiti in 2010. The category is called TPS, for Temporary Protected Status, and it only applies to Haitians who were here prior to the earthquake. And now the Trump administration says that protection will end in 2019. Councilman Williams is also one of 8 members running to be the next Speaker of the City Council as Melissa Mark Viverito leaves because of term limits at the end of the year. Councilman, thanks for doing this. Welcome back to WNYC.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on.
Tell us about your district first. How diverse is it in general? And tell us about the Haitian population.
Like New York City, it's pretty diverse. It is a predominant of Caribbean and Caribbean first generation and immigrants. We have a nice sizable amount of Orthodox Jews. Within that Caribbean population, the plurality is clearly Haitian. So we have a great number of Haitians and Haitian immigrants and first generation. Probably the largest block between mine and a neighboring district outside of Haiti and Florida.
And explain TPS for those to whom this is new. These 60,000 Haitians were here in the U.S. before the quake. Temporary Protected Status, TPS, were they mostly undocumented?
They were for everyone. There are a lot that were undocumented up until that point. I would say that when they received TPS, they were no longer undocumented. I think we need to make that clear. So these are people who are documented, have papers, are working legally for a large part, 90% of them are in the workforce. And so we know who they are. We know why they're here. They were granted temporary protected status after the Haitian earthquake. And we have to remember, since January 12th, I believe, in 2010, there's been a major earthquake. There's been a cholera outbreak. That's on top of the issues that Haiti was receiving, getting the issues that Haiti was dealing with before. And the State Department, as we speak, has a travel warning for Americans traveling to Haiti, saying that it is a dangerous place to be going to. And so for the State Department to, at one hand, say Americans shouldn't go there, it's not good enough for you to go, but it is good enough for other people, is the height of hypocrisy. Unfortunately, not surprising coming from this White House.
Do you know the cause for the travel warning? Is it because of the cholera epidemic? Is it because of political unrest? What is it?
I believe it's a combination of things that I mentioned. There's always been political issues that people have been concerned about, but I believe it's a combination of the earthquake, the cholera outbreak, and the hurricanes that have hit. That's a combination of things that it's tough for the country to overcome. There are some areas, that are doing well, but overall, the country has a lot of work to do, and it's inhumane to send anyone there. And the State Department knows that, and it's disgusting that they don't value the lives of the Haitian people who are documented and who are working and who have kids and businesses in this country.
Councilman, I was reading up on this morning, and I saw a Miami Herald article from fall 2016 that said the Obama administration was resuming deportations of Haitians coming into the country illegally, which it had largely suspended since the earthquake. In that case, just a year ago, the Obama administration cited improved conditions in Haiti in the years since the quake. So can you say that this is Trump being anti-immigrant, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, I will say I've been one of the people that haven't minced words, particularly around Obama and deportations. He's deported more people than the 2 or 3 presidents combined. I was very vocal about that before, and people kind of didn't want to talk about it. We did have some concerns with Obama, as you mentioned. Some of the deportations, just in general, that were going on earlier this year were actually Obama deportations, and we should be honest about this. The Trump administration has taken it to a whole other level. He's already taken away TPS from Nicaraguans, from Sudanese, and it's just going to keep growing and growing. We did have hope that at least the Obama administration, there were people of good conscience in there that we can talk to, and we did have success. That's very slim in this administration, people of good conscience. Again, it's not about, as I look at this, actually deporting so many people. It's $1 billion that's going to cost employers to replace their employees. It's about $3 billion to deport this amount of Haitians, just the Haitian population on TPS. I believe what people want to do in that administration is sow a fear amongst the rest of the population, describe people as other so that you can therefore exploit them for their talents and for political needs, and create an underclass of people who have to be in the shadows. That's dangerous for everyone. So there is no real demonstrable reason to be doing this except for the exploitative nature of it, because it costs too much. It doesn't benefit anyone economically or safety reasons. So really, there's no practical reason why we should be applying this.
Marie in Brooklyn, you're on WNYC. Hi, Marie. Marie, are you there? Oh, looks like we lost Marie's line. Marie, if you're out there, you can call us back. But, Councilman, on this idea of TPS, it is called temporary protected status. And part of the Trump administration position is that it's been almost 8 years since the quake in this particular case. It's been decades since the hurricane in Central America that they suspended the TPS for in the case of Nicaraguans just recently. By its very name, it's temporary protected status for people in special circumstances, and they don't want there to be a drift so that anyone who ever gets a temporary status to protect them from an emergency is then assumed to be permanent, and anyone who wants to keep that definition intact, temporary, is racist or anti-immigrant. What would you say to that concern?
Well, I guess I'll answer that in 3 parts. On its face value of the temporary part, in the case of the Haitians who are here, there's absolutely no evidence that this temporary order should be changed at this moment in time by the State Department's own admission and a travel warning being put in. So there's nobody who can say, even if they believe that it should just be temporary, that temporary should end anytime soon because of the issues we've outlined. Second, we should always evaluate what we're doing based on the practical reasons. And so what is the reason, if you wanted to make an argument, to deport these people? Just because? Is it any safety reason? Are they doing something that's harming other people to Americans? Are they providing a tax base to Americans? 30% of them have mortgages. 11% own businesses. It's going to cost employers $1 billion to replace them. It's going to cost the country $3 billion to deport them. So what do we gain from deporting them? And the last thing is I want to put it in context in most questions that come like this, that have this kind of, well, we're doing this because of law, rule of law. I always say, and it's true, there's a lot of laws in this country. It is impossible to enforce every law everywhere, every hour at the same time. So we always have to decide where we're putting our resources. The question is, why are you putting any resources on any one law at any particular time? And what this administration has done, they've done it on the basis of bias and fear, not the basis of safety. And we see that when it comes to discussions of gun control and issues around gun violence, where the vast majority of Americans who are threatened and are dying and have safety issues all around guns, they do absolutely nothing about it. Even when hundreds of people are killed in mass shootings, they just do nothing. When it comes to something like TPS, where there is no demonstrable safety issue, where there is no demonstrable harm being done to Americans in any way, economically or otherwise, when it's going to actually harm us to deport them, that's where they put their emphasis.
Interesting contrast.
Since you're my special friend, come closer for a special treat. I'm going to let you touch me in a special place.
It is never okay to touch someone else's private parts. Your mom and dad will tell you so.
The list only growing among Democrats who are calling on Congressman John Conyers to resign.
Others in the Michigan delegation want a swift end to this troubling episode. Rod Maloney is live tonight outside Conyers' home with a look at how members who flew home tonight are feeling after this very long week of wrangling over the congressman's future. Rod?
Yes, Kimberly. You know, when you look back, Congressman Conyers gave up his power on Sunday, his Judiciary Committee post. He spent one day in Washington before returning home here under a cloud of suspicion, wound up in the hospital with exhaustion, chest pains, shortness of breath. Now it's looking like, according to sources close to the situation, that he's weighing a retirement on medical grounds, and that could come in the next 48 hours or so. But his colleagues say tonight that this issue is much bigger than the congressman, and sexual harassment is something that needs to be taken head on in Washington, D.C. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell is married to the man who gave John Conyers his political start, and she calls this week a long and painful journey, considering she wants Conyers to resign.
I couldn't look like a woman that had a double standard. This man has done great things. These allegations are disturbing. When the rest of the delegation had called for, I'm just struggling. I'm really struggling. I'm not sleeping.
She believes the sexual harassment problem in Washington, D.C. is far bigger than Congressman Conyers.
Every woman has a story, but where is this all going? How do we make this the real moment?
Something Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence wants to see happen as well. She previously hadn't weighed in on the resignation issue and won't.
We can go on the camera all day and say he should resign, but you know what? Not a single member of Congress can force him to resign. That is something he has to do independently. And right now he's in a hospital.
Michigan's Republican representatives haven't been heard from on the issue, but 10th District Congressman Paul Mitchell told Local 4 that these kinds of tough decisions are what leadership is all about.
The reports are troubling, and if they're accurate, in my opinion, the congressman should do the right thing and decide to retire. At this point in time, that's his choice. He understands what's real and not.
Now, Brenda Lawrence, the congresswoman from Southfield, co-sponsored the bill going through the House that would require annual sexual harassment training for everybody on the Capitol Hill. She's also pushing to make public the names of congressmen and women who settle these kinds of sexual harassment cases. Right now, they are not. She wants that to change as well. Back to you.
Okay, Rod, and what do we know about a time frame for the congressman to make a decision?
Well, Arnold Reed, his attorney today, said that it would be probably over the weekend that they would probably come up with a decision. The question becomes whether they actually make the decision and then announce it. You'll recall that last Sunday, the congressman put out a press release about mid-afternoon, about 1 o'clock on a Sunday, stepping down from his Judiciary Committee post. Will they repeat that this week? That's a question. We'll be waiting.
Racial classification confusion.
Some people who follow the Census Bureau closely are dreading a possible appointment by President Trump. The president can name the number 2 official who will oversee the census in the year 2020. Politico is reporting the candidates for the key job include Thomas Brunel. He has no government experience.
He does have experience as a university professor who has supported Republican redistricting plans in the past. That's the drawing of legislative districts based on the census. Those concerned include Terry Ann Lowenthal. She's a former staff director of the House Subcommittee on Census and Population, and she spoke with Steve Inskeep.
What I'm really worried about is that background will shake public confidence in the objectivity and integrity of the census. The census must be above any suspicion of partisan interference or an outcome that's tainted by manipulation of counting operations for partisan gain. And the deputy director is the day-to-day manager of the Census Bureau. So he or she must have significant management experience. And to my knowledge, Dr. Brunel does not have those qualifications.
Couldn't Brunel, though, say, look, I'm going to set my politics aside. We all have political views, but counting is counting, and I'm going to make sure there's an accurate count.
That would be a good thing, but I worry about how the public will view someone whose substantial body of work does not speak to that.
So help me understand what could go wrong here as you try to count 320, 330, 340 million people. What is a scenario under which that count could go wrong in a way that would have a political effect?
Many people don't realize that the census doesn't count all communities equally well. So people of color, immigrants, young children are all undercounted at disproportionately high rates, while non-Hispanic whites and wealthier households were overcounted in the 2010 census. And it is the Census Bureau's goal, of course, to try and reduce or eliminate that disproportionate undercounting, the inequalities in the count. But, a director will make a lot of decisions about how money is spent on advertising and outreach to the hardest to count communities, on where local offices are located, the types of people that are hired. And so there's really room in there for decisions that may not improve the accuracy of the count in these communities that historically have been vulnerable to higher undercounting.
How did the overcount of white people and the undercount of people of color happen in 2010 when there was a Democratic administration?
It's not just 2010. This is a historic pattern that the Census Bureau has been able to measure scientifically, in fact, going back to 1940.
So you feel this job should belong to a nonpartisan expert. I'm sure you're familiar with the idea that lots of Americans have lost faith in experts generally. Not even the idea of nonpartisanship they may not have a lot of faith in. What do you say to somebody who doesn't really buy there is a nonpartisan expert?
It is incumbent on Congress, the Census Bureau, and I will venture to say even the president, to reassure Americans that the census is one of the most important activities the government does, and that they will do everything possible to make sure it is carried out in the most objective, nonpartisan way possible. The deputy director is a career civil service position. It is going to take a lot of trusted messengers, not just at the federal level, but more importantly at the neighborhood level, to convince people that the census is important. It's vital that they participate for the benefit of their community so that they have a voice in our democracy. And that's going to take resources.
Terry Ann Lowenthal, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
That was Terry Ann Lowenthal speaking to Steve Inskeep. She's a consultant on census issues for a variety of organizations.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus has mentioned for years about the sequencing of news clips. We actually had a C.O.W.S listener who wrote in with the sound clip and said, I think this is another illustration of the importance of how news clips get sequenced. So I'm going to play this. This is the exact way that these two segments were broadcast on the BBC.
Eyelid surgery and even jawbone shaving are two of the most popular forms of plastic surgery in South Korea. More people there undergo treatments like that than in any other country. Adverts promoting the surgery are everywhere, but there's a backlash against them, and Seoul Metro is now saying it wants to ban the ads. So really, how big is plastic surgery in South Korea? Celia Hatton is from our Asia Pacific desk.
It's massive, Nick. Now, statistics vary, but we think about approximately 20% of all women have plastic surgery in South Korea. A lot of cosmetic surgery is really aimed at young women. The gift of cosmetic surgery is often given as a graduation gift, a new nose or new eyelids or a slimmer chin. And it really is this massive industry. It really is something that is done by a lot of women. Now, men also get plastic surgery as well. But particularly the advertising is aimed over and over again at women.
So why is Seoul Metro saying it's actually made this ban?
Well, they first reference the number of complaints they're receiving in relation to the advertising that really is wallpapered all over Seoul's subway stations. And so people have complained, and the company or the administration has really responded to this. Their statement, they said that plastic surgery ads have been perceived as the source of lookism and the sexualization of the female body, and there's been a rise in the number of complaints in response to them due to the growing interest in gender issues such as sexism since 2015. Even though they're going to take a knock in revenue, they're going to devote more advertising space to arts and culture advertising.
So they're responding to a public backlash against these adverts. But what impact do you think it's going to have on plastic surgery uptake across society then?
It's difficult because when you look into this issue in South Korea, on the one hand, we've got hit television shows that are devoted to remaking people's lives by giving them free plastic surgery. So there really is a celebration of that. The most popular area in Seoul for plastic surgery clinics has about 500 clinics in just a few city blocks. So no one thinks that this industry is dying off anytime soon.
Why do you think it's so widespread in South Korea? What are people in South Korea trying to achieve by doing this?
One thing that's repeated over and over again is that there is a lot of pressure in South Korea to get the right jobs. And really, plastic surgery is often marketed as the way to get a leg up on the competition. That maybe you don't have the best marks, but you can, in a job interview, flash your perfect smile or show off your eyelids or whatever, and that might get you a step ahead. So a lot of people are pointing to the fact that it's just this high-pressure society, and this is seen as a way of getting ahead in that society.
Celia Hatton. Now, have you ever wandered into a room, seen a picture that's not level with the walls or the ceiling, and had an overwhelming desire to straighten it? Well, watch out if you have, because psychologists in the United States believe that such a tendency makes us more likely to be prejudiced and even racist. The newsroom's reporter, Richard Hamilton, explains.
The team from Yale University conducted a series of 8 experiments and found that those who felt uncomfortable with geometric quirks, say a line of triangles in which one is out of whack with the others, also score highly when it comes to feeling prejudice towards those who stand out from the norm. The team was led by Anton Gollwitzer.
We looked at people's dislike and aversion, discomfort towards images of broken patterns made of geometric shapes. And then we relate those responses to their responses towards social deviancy. Anything from how they feel against black individuals in the United States to how they feel against commonly stigmatized individuals. So people, let's say, with a skin condition or somebody in a wheelchair or other examples like that. So we found that even 3-year-olds, when they see images of geometric patterns where there's an image out of line, don't like it. There's one that really, in particular, was awesome to watch, where this girl is looking at a picture of triangles in a row where one's out of line, and she's like, I don't like it. And then we asked them, why did you pick that one? And she's like, I don't like it. I don't like when it's like out of line like that. It makes me upset or something.
It seems then that these early signs of discomfort with things that are not in order provide clues as to why we avoid outsiders. But Anton Gollwitzer hastens to add that just because we might be fastidious and neat does not mean we're doomed to be racist. As we learn social concepts such as personal responsibility and self-regulation, he says these outweigh negative instincts. He also adds that this does not give messy teenagers an excuse to have untidy rooms, because that must mean they are less racist.
That was Richard Hamilton.
The BBC was not done. They came back. All of this is from the same broadcast this week, this past Tuesday. They came back right at the tail end of the same broadcast to add this.
Let me take you to the Midwest of the United States now, specifically Flint in Michigan. Between 2014 and 2015, nearly 100,000 people there were exposed to high levels of lead because of a contaminated water supply. What had started as a cost-cutting measure resulted in multiple illnesses and an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease that caused at least 12 deaths. And nearly 2 years after a state of emergency was declared, residents still face a lack of clean water in this poor, mostly black city. The BBC's Aline McBall spoke to those still affected.
Anybody in the car getting water today? How many waters? We give you up to 5.
I'll take 5.
Say 5 waters. One of everything, 5 waters, guys.
The people of Flint in Michigan still come to collect water for their families from relief workers outside a church. They've been doing this now for a full 2 years since the catastrophe here was uncovered.
It has put us just through hell. There's just no other way to say it. Health-wise, emotionally, physically, and it just dragged on.
The first moment Kerry Weber knew there was a problem was when she took her daughter to the hospital.
They showed me parts of her scan that you could see the bone like in her wrist, and there was literally a line. It's a lighter gray in color instead of the white calcium bone, and it was lead. And they were everywhere.
It was soon clear Kerry's daughter had lead poisoning from tap water that was later shown to be many times over the legal lead limit. Her other daughter contracted Legionnaire's disease, of which there was a huge spike in cases in Flint. In the town of 100,000 people, it's thought lead poisoning also caused a dramatic increase in infertility, miscarriages, growth abnormalities in unborn children, and behavioral problems.
The only thing really unusual about what happened in Flint is that the agencies responsible got caught.
Dr. Mark Edwards, one of the scientists who discovered Flint's high lead levels, says this is not just a local scandal, but an urgent national crisis in the U.S.
It actually elevated the blood lead of children. In most cities where this kind of crime, and I believe it's a crime, is occurring, no one looks at the blood lead of children to see if there's a problem. I can guarantee you this is happening in other parts of the country, other cities.
In fact, hundreds of communities in towns and even major cities around the U.S. have been found to have water with serious lead toxicity.
We have not accepted in this country that affordable, safe drinking water is a basic human right. Our paradigm really is every city and town gets the water that they can afford. And if you can't afford to get clean, safe water, that's just your tough luck.
But what does he mean by that? Well, in Flint, the crisis started when the town wanted to save money, so it stopped taking water from the system in the neighbouring city and switched to water from a local river that was so contaminated it reacted with lead in the city's water pipes.
There it goes!
Lead pipes are finally being replaced in Flint and the water supply has been switched back. But people here are scarred by what happened. We found this man sitting on his doorstep, watching work being done by the water company on his street.
I don't think it's safe, because the piping is contaminated. The main water line is contaminated. The lines in the house is contaminated. Your hot water heater is contaminated. If your refrigerator hooked up to it, it's contaminated.
So when they tell you it's safe and you can drink the water, what do you say?
I'm not going to drink it. I will buy my water.
America works hard in projects around the world to ensure communities have access to safe drinking water. But here in the US, scientists say millions of Americans are drinking water that is poisoning them. And it's mainly happening in communities where so many don't have a voice. Kerry Weber again.
Flint is poor, very poor. You're looking at your kid go through this, or your spouse, or 100,000 people, and knowing that none of them mattered enough. Yeah, that's really hard to take.
That was Flint resident Kerry Weber, ending that report by Aline McBall.
For a copper as good as I, a book of garbage drinking crocodile. Don't resist a pudding pie. You think I won't, but why wouldn't I? I'm a cop.
A sheriff's deputy is under fire tonight for a controversial message he put on social media. It stems from a comment he made about settlement money for the girlfriend of a man who was shot and killed by a police officer.
Fox 9's Christina Palladino live in our newsroom tonight. Christina, the Rice County deputy is not on duty right now.
Well, he's not working, he's not returning our calls, and he deleted his entire Twitter account.
The City of St. Anthony Village City Council has determined that the approval of the settlement agreement is in the best interest of the City of St. Anthony Village.
Just a few hours after city leaders in St. Anthony voted Tuesday to hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars to Diamond Reynolds, whose boyfriend, Philando Castile, was shot and killed, this tweet was sent. Fox 9 has confirmed with the Rice County Sheriff's Office that one of their deputies, Tom McBroom, wrote, quote, "She'll have that spent in 6 months on crack cocaine.
You smoke crack, don't you?
I hope she loses all her state and county aid. Now she has this cash." We reached the Rice County Sheriff by phone, who learned about the insensitive tweets last night.
I just want to say the comments do not reflect the beliefs or opinions of anybody here at the Sheriff's Office, in our administration or patrol.
McBroom has been a Rice County Sheriff's deputy for 12 years. He's since been taken off patrol. The sheriff says he's never heard racist comments from McBroom before.
I've not ever seen anything like that from him before, no.
McBroom deleted his Twitter account, but he's still up on the Elysian City Council website as one of their members. Reynolds will receive $800,000 in total as part of a settlement from St. Anthony and 2 other groups. She was in the car when a St. Anthony police officer shot and killed Castile. Her 5-year-old daughter was in the back seat. She live-streamed the aftermath of the shooting on Facebook Live. And we reached out to Diamond Reynolds' attorney, but he did not have any comment on this tweet tonight. The Rice County Sheriff would not disclose the disciplinary action, if any, he would take against McBroom. I also never heard back from the mayor in Elysian.
The wisdom of psychopaths. What saints, spies, and serial killers can teach about success.
New this hour, investigators say the suspects in a racially motivated murder kept the crime secret for 34 years by intimidating witnesses. We learned new information today about the murder of Timothy Coggins and the threats a GBI agent says his killers made to remain free.
There were multiple witnesses since that time who had come forward admitting to hearing either Franklin Gebhardt or Bill Moore, or both of them admitting to the murder of Timothy Coggins.
GBI agent Jared Coleman took the stand in a Griffin courtroom. He testified about what he calls Frankie Gebhardt and Bill Moore's decades-long efforts to cover up their crime. The men are accused of stabbing to death Timothy Coggins, chaining his body to a truck, and dragging him into the woods. Investigators say they did it because Coggins socialized with a white woman.
They felt that they were doing the right thing by almost like they were protecting the white race from black people.
The GBI agent revealed the men kept it secret for so long by threatening witnesses. He read a direct quote from a witness, including extremely offensive language.
Mr. Gebhardt would threaten her that, quote, if you keep on, you're going to wind up like that in the ditch. And also, he would threaten her that, quote, you will make me drag you down the road like we dragged the down the road, end quote.
Extremely difficult. Outside of the courtroom, Coggins' niece told us how, despite the pain of hearing those words, she needed to face his accused killers in court.
And you oftentimes wonder, what was he thinking? Who did he cry for? Who did he mourn for? No one was there to help him.
An attorney for Gebhardt and Moore questioned whether the motive may have actually been a drug deal that turned violent. Either way, the judge decided there was enough evidence to proceed with the trial, and the case could go to a grand jury as soon as next week.
I'm out of here, man. Hey, yo, check it out, man. I got Black Caesar at the crib, man. Y'all want to go check that out? Yeah. That's the idea. We could have rolled it from the beginning. Y'all with it, man. Fuck Hollywood, man.
The annual African Diaspora International Film Festival opened its 25th season last Friday. It runs in a number of Manhattan venues until December 10th and includes 64 films from 31 countries that are about iconic figures like Miriam Makeba and Winnie Mandela, but also tell the stories of people of color around the world who are coping with poverty, war, and the impact of colonialism. Joining us now are the festival's co-director, Diar Endo Spesh, and artist Ben Jones, who's an advisory board member. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for having us.
Now, I'm concerned about that, the use of the word diaspora. This is not completely about diaspora. You have a lot of African filmmakers also in the festival over the years.
Of course.
The ones who made movies in Africa.
Yes. The way we think of the African diaspora is basically people of African scattered all over the world, and that includes people on the continent that travel from one place to the other. So we show films from the continent, we show films from the Caribbean, from Latin America, from all over.
And you started it in 1993?
Yes.
That was a time when there were a number of black films being made in the United States that were getting a lot of attention, like Malcolm X, Sugar Hill, Boys in the Hood, and films like that.
Yes, the films, I think we wanted to enhance that, that perception of what the black experience is by also showcasing what is black from a global perspective, which is something that was not really happening when we attended. We started by going to film festival because we are film lovers, like at the World Film Festival in Montreal and other places, and we realized that in terms of the art house world, the art films, there were very few films that represented the black experience, the experience of people of color. And so our interest is to combine the quality of the film with the storytelling.
But there are any number of African filmmakers who achieved international
Absolutely,
fame.
Yes.
Ashraf Fahmy, Moussa Touré, Mufida Titli, perhaps the most famous was Ousmane Sembène.
Absolutely.
But they're not household names.
No, none of those films, none of those filmmakers are household names. African cinema has a hard time. Art house, independent world cinema has a hard time, and when it comes to films that deal with the black experience, it's even more difficult.
Is one of your goals to inform various people of color the experience of others?
Absolutely. We really wanted to create through the festival, a bridge across communities, because in fact, a lot of people of color don't really know each other's. We have a lot in common. We also have differences, and we see films as an educational tool, as a way to communicate, and really that was one of the interests. The other interest is also to give a platform for these films, to give it a national platform, because it's true that a lot of those films get neglected in even art house cinemas, and so we have been able to give a national limelight to some of those films, like Kiriko and the Sorceress, The Tracker by Rolf de Heer, or The Pirogi by Moussa Touré, which is one of the directors you mentioned. All of those films came initially from the festival and then got national recognition. So that's also the work of the festival.
One of the things that becomes apparent is the diversity of films from Africa. Africans who've been on the show have often objected to being lumped together as Africans, as though Africa was one country, when we're talking about a wide range of countries, cultures, religions, ethnicities,
right.
etc.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we present films from North Africa. For example, we have a film by Khaleb El Agar, who is an Egyptian filmmaker, who is very controversial. He's done a number of films like Lust, which was actually submitted for the Oscars by the Egypt Commission for 2010. And one film we're showing this year of his is called Sins of the Flesh, and it's set during the 2011 Egyptian Revolution, and it's a love story, but it's also a social commentary about power. That's one example. We also have.
Did he have to deal with censorship?
Absolutely. We're showing the director's cut, but over there he had to deal with censorship. Absolutely, and he had they had to be 18 or older to be able to go see the film.
Sembène, when he came on the show, talked about how he had a lot of support from Senegal when the country was supporting the arts, and then suddenly all that money dried up. These are artists who also have to deal with just trying to get financing to make their films.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. There was a time when the French government also was helping a lot with, through the Francophonie filmmakers, and they're still doing it a little bit, but the funding has been reduced. There are certain industries in North Africa in particular that have a strong film industry, and they do have funds to support filmmakers. Some have to deal with censorship, others less, but there are other countries that have absolutely no financial funds.
Ben, how did you come to join the festival's advisory board?
Well, I was always active in different black cultural, political things. And coming out of the 60s, when everything seemed to come together in terms of politics and culture and art and things like that. So when I came and became aware of this festival, I said I have to go to it. And then also I used to be a professor at a university over in Jersey City where I live, and I invited them to come to the university because we have very few black film festivals in Jersey City, so that's how I got involved. And the fact that I go to Cuba, where I've been there about 83 times, is that her husband is Cuban, and I made contact with him and got involved.
When you say her husband, we are talking about Diarra's husband.
Yes.
Yes. Now, there's a film about you in the festival. I don't know whether we call that nepotism, but The Art of the Journey, the Ben Jones story, and it deals with the struggles of the Cuban people.
Right. Well, I'm always proud to tell people I'm a socialist, and like I said, with going to Cuba so much and seeing and experiencing the revolution there, and the good things about education and healthcare and culture and things like that. I wanted to have a film that really, not just because you coming from an art background and I coming from an art background, and remember reading books when we were in school about artists' lives, and or when you would see critics talk about artists' works, it was just this formal academic thing. So we did a film where we tried to give a sense of the whole person, because I used to be a dancer and things like that.
Well, unlike other communist countries, Cuba has a wide range of art styles coming from its artists. And there are abstract artists. There's the full range, and some of them do very well. In fact, when tourists come and buy their work, they make more money than the doctors do.
That's why some of them stay there.
Now, there's a film called Garumbe, Afro-Andalusian Memories, that suggests that flamenco dance is connected to slaves that were brought to Spain in the 16th century. I always thought that that flamenco was the music of the Roma.
Well, it is also the music of the Roma, but there's no denial there's also an African influence. So both those influences exist. And if you come see the film, and we will actually have the director, who is a Spaniard. He did this work based on doctorate research done by a scholar who found archival footage that showed that there were 60,000 slaves in Sevilla in the 1600s who lived there, and she was able to demonstrate, and he was able to demonstrate with a lot of scholars that really the African dance tradition can be found into flamenco, and the film shows that. And in fact, during the festival on the Saturday, December 9, on Sunday, December 10, I'm sorry, there will be a demonstration also of flamenco by a dancer of African descent.
Well, since it's all about rhythm,
it's all about
flamenco
rhythm.
Dancers often sound like jazz drummers.
Well, I mean,
and they're doing it all with their feet,
and the hands. And when you see some Zabbat dancing in Senegal, and you see the drumming, then you realize that there's a connection between the drumming with the hands and the drumming in Africa. Yeah.
Now, what are your criteria for choosing films? Because you have such a wide range of topics that you deal with.
Right. Well, we are looking for films that have a good production value, and also that tell a story that is realistic, that put forward the human experience of people of color.
A lot of them are documentaries.
About half, usually.
You opened the festival with The Last Revolutionary, about two former self-described revolutionaries in California whose lives take very different paths.
Right. One goes corporate and starts working for the FBI, and the other one stays a revolutionary and has all of the arms necessary to fight white supremacism. Yeah, so it's an interesting film, very provocative.
One of the more interesting films I'm sure for our listeners, will be Sam Pollard's documentary about Sammy Davis Jr., which will be shown on American Masters next year. But you're showing it this Wednesday. And that's a film about identity as much as it is about a great entertainer.
Exactly. It's a film that shows how a lot of people who achieve success have to deal with acceptance and finding a voice. You know, they have talent, but they are not necessarily accepted neither by blacks nor by white because of who they are. And that's something that a lot of people of African descent have to deal with.
Can you talk about the Man Who Mends Women that features Dr. Dennis Mukwege? Do films like that ever inspire actionable responses from the audience?
Yes, sometimes. We did show this film before, and the action is really to donate money. Dr. Mukwege is a very courageous man who works in the Democratic Republic of Congo to help women who have been subjected to sexual abuse during the civil war. And he has created a hospital where he helps them not only physically but also emotionally, and also he trains them so that they can rebuild their lives because their lives are destroyed. And he really is, the action there is just donate to the hospital.
The festival is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Have you seen, do the films over the years reveal changes in the socio-political climates of the times?
That's an interesting question.
If you were to show some of the films from the first years, would people think, they're kind of dated? Or would they seem just as relevant as the ones that you have today?
I'm afraid they're just as relevant for the most part.
Alas.
Yeah. I'm afraid they are. They are. When we deal with issues of identity, of acceptance, of marginalization, of poverty, all of these issues are still very current. And we were thinking that maybe with the Obama years things would improve, but now we're going back. So it feels like our festival is more relevant today than it ever was before.
Well, on the one hand, we have television shows like Issa Rae's Insecure, Donald Glover, also Atlanta, but we also have a hashtag Oscars Oh So White.
Yeah, this is I think a reflection of the times with the media, with social media. I think there are many more voices now than ever before. The challenge is to find those voices that say something that's political. I think people want to entertain, they want to make a buck, they don't necessarily want to inform, or they don't necessarily want to go deeper into the issues. And that's one of the things that our festival does. It really brings forth some films that I think are not commercial films. And so they are maybe more complex in terms of what they portray.
Is Hollywood giving us any films that deal with the black experience?
I saw one recently that was excellent with Denzel Washington about this lawyer who fights the system, but it's a very, very good film. So it happens.
And it got a lot of
Detroit
advertising behind it, which would suggest that there is a feeling that there is an audience out there.
Right.
The full schedule of the African Diaspora International Film Festival can be found on our show page at wnyc.org/Lopate. Screenings are around town. They're at the Columbia Teachers College, at the Cinema Village, and at Mist Harlem, which is also a restaurant on 116th Street.
Yes, and a cafe and a bar. Yes, so you can entertain yourself.
So will different films be shown at different places?
Yes.
Or will any of them be shown in all the different venues?
At least in some cases in 2 venues, yeah.
Thank you both so much for being on our show.
Thank you for having us.
I've been speaking to the African Diaspora International Film Festival's co-director, Dr. Ndo Spesh, and to artist Ben Jones, who is on the festival's advisory board and is also the subject of one of the films being shown this year. It's been a real pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, December 2nd, 2017. So I have been told this is our weekly compensatory call-in. Dial in if you have thoughts, counter-racist suggestions, commentary on any of the news segments that we just heard. The number to dial, 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. A few things before we get to some of the callers who dialed in. The C.O.W.S is listener supported, counter-racist radio. Invest if you think the program is constructive. You can visit my blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. When you hit the blog, PayPal button is in the top right corner. If you're not into PayPal, drop us an email. We will get you a physical mailing address. Huge thanks to all the folks who have invested nearly a decade of counter-racist broadcasting. I hope it has been constructive, worthy of your time and energy. Thanks also to all the folks who've nabbed items from our wish list. It's under Gus T Renegade at Amazon.com. Thanks for the folks who have nabbed items. I hope the program has been, continues to be worthy of your time and energy. Other items I wanted to make sure to touch on before we get to the folks who dialed. The first segment that we started with that reported on Miss Mary Hamilton, that was exactly what the clip was about, her counter-racist efforts. Fascinating on many accounts. If she has a biography, that would be interesting to read. Her choice not to pass and then all of her efforts during that tumultuous time period in the 60s. One thing that did stand out in that segment that I wanted to make sure to comment on, where they said that Dr. King hit on her, put that in quotes. I would like more details. I think my counter-racist stance, at least for the time being, if I get additional information, I'll change. There are too many rumors and accusations with regards to Dr. King about his sexual infidelity, since a lot of that, in my opinion, those rumors are centered with the COINTELPRO actions and them trying to libel him and smear him and other black people as well. But him specifically targeting him and putting out rumors that, oh my God, he's having all these orgies and affairs and doing this both while he was alive and since his passing. I am greatly suspicious about any of those accusations directed at Dr. King. I would need a lot more evidence and verification. It's a little too easy to slip in an anecdote or just slip in any bit of misinformation or deception. It's too easy for someone to do that, particularly in a mainstream outlet. That report came from NPR. That's just the thought that I had while that piece was going. If other folks have reflections on that, that is fine as well. Other items that stood out, I wanted to make sure I addressed. We should be here tomorrow. Mr. Alfred McCoy, suspected racist. I wanted him to come on the program because he wrote a book about the decades of heroin trafficking way before it got to this big opioid crisis and white involvement with that, all the way up to, CIA and major government entities in the United States. But he has a new book. And of course, folks, when they write their new book, they want to promote and get people to buy that. So you wanted to talk about his new book, which is about the decline of the American empire. I've been reading the book for the past few days. No mention of racism, even though he's talking about events that were flagrantly, explicitly about racism, where he goes through and talks about colonization of the Philippines, where he talks about black treatment of soldiers during the Vietnam War, talking about the Vietnam itself. Lots of incidents that, in my view, are directly related to white supremacy racism, but there's no mention of those terms. And even when he's talking about the decline of American empire, he's not really identifying specifically which people are supposed to be losing power. It certainly can't be the decline of American empire means that black people are about to fall off. That can't be what it means. Yeah, that is something major that has stuck out as I've been reading. He should be here tomorrow, normal broadcast time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll be looking forward to chatting it up with him. We also should be here on Tuesday. The AFIA Center. This is a nonprofit organization that they've made it their mission specifically to help black females, and specifically they're talking a lot and doing a lot of work around maternal mortality rates and getting resources for black mothers, black expecting mothers, so that they can produce healthy black children. They should be here on Tuesday. I know we had people who were inquiring about doulas, midwives, lactation counseling, all of that dealing with the child rearing needs, resources. We should be covering a lot of that this coming Tuesday. I believe that's December 5, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Next, the segment from the BBC, where it was actually several separate segments where they were talking about the eye surgery in South Korea and then plastic surgery in general. They got through that entire segment about that report specifically with no mention of the word racism, white supremacy, and how that would possibly be contributing to those eye surgeries. I know we've talked about that before. And then they transitioned from that directly to the report about how people who, if they see a picture that is not quite aligned, that might have some sort of correlation to them being racist, which, interesting. If folks have thoughts on that, feel free to share. And then they went from that. I could have played 4 consecutive reports. There was one report that I omitted, but they were talking about ethnic cleansing, charges of ethnic cleansing on the other side of the planet. And then they went from that to the situation in Flint, ongoing situation with the chemical and biological warfare to keep a predominantly black city from having clean water, where they did bring in racism, white supremacy, not using those terms, of course, to describe it. But fascinating segment from the BBC. And again, I think a lot of times when they talk about not listening to the news or not reading the news or not watching the news and saying that they think that it's just a lot of deception and inaccurate information, which is often the case. Generally speaking, they're talking about racism, white supremacy all the time, whether it's directly, indirectly. Sometimes they're just not using the explicit terms, but I mean lots and lots of reporting on what is happening globally with regards to the system of white supremacy. Next, one more thing I wanted to make sure that I touched on. That situation down in Georgia, where they just arrested the 2 race soldiers, charging them with the 1983, not 1950s, not 1940s, not 1920s, 1983 lynching of a black male down in Georgia. I just thought that was very, very important because, again, you cannot have white people be ignorant about racism, white supremacy, and this is another one of those crimes where it seems you had white people who were informed about this. A murder. You had white people who knew about this for about a quarter of a century, and they didn't tell anybody. Now, they said that these race soldiers also were intimidating witnesses, right? They said that in the sound segment to make them, shut up and be quiet and that sort of thing. That excuse would not be acceptable to me at all from a person classified as white. Whites, they know how to get protection. They know how to report things so that they can be shielded. They can be guarded, particularly if it is a large number of whites. And it didn't seem like it was just 1 or 2 people who knew about this lynching, killing a black male, dragging him behind the vehicle. We've heard that sort of thing before, right? Jasper, Texas. But yeah, you cannot be ignorant about racism, white supremacy. And it also seems like they were bragging about what they did, proud of their antics. We've talked about that as well with Wisdom of Psychopath. In fact, I've talked about that for years, where white people, they brag about this sort of thing. Yeah, we killed them. Yeah, we drug them behind the truck. Proud to do it. Dylan Storm Roof, you see this sort of, or I see this sort of behavior all the time. They're not ashamed. They don't feel bad. They're not guilty about terrorizing black people. They live for abusing, terrorizing, making non-white people suffer, in particular, black people. That's it. We will go ahead and transition to the callers. If you know you are in a noisy environment, if you could use your mute button, that would be super appreciated. It just helps preserve the quality of the broadcast. If you can, make whatever comments that you like, but just mute your line. That way we don't pick up all that extra. If you have, the television on in the background, or if there are other people that are talking and what have you. Also, if you could take approximately 5 minutes to share whatever commentary you have, that would be super appreciated. Just make sure everybody gets at least one opportunity to share. And then if you have alternative questions or comments, we should have ample time for you to share. Also, before I forget, I found myself in a situation. I was invited to a dinner engagement last Sunday. We went, hung out. It was all non-white people, thankfully, mostly black people. Went to hang out, and I found myself in that situation. I'm sure other folks have been there, where we're not talking about racism, white supremacy for the most part. And conversation is kind of all over the place. Nothing, no name calling or anything like that. Just not talking directly about racism, white supremacy. The conversation drifts to television programs, and lots of television programs that I do not watch. And I got put on the spot where they started making empire references. I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be able to participate at all. They started asking questions like, oh yeah, such and such, he's on Empire and such and such. Nope, I have never seen that program and do not anticipate ever watching that program. I'm not going to catch any of these frames of reference, and that happened a few times. I did not feel bad. I did not feel sad. I did not feel like, oh man, I need to go binge watch so that I can catch up and be cool next time around. I did not feel that way at all. Just said maybe one of these days we will improve. They'll take Empire off the air. And they will not add it to Netflix. We can go about our counter-racist business. That's it. For this broadcast exclusively, I do request if we could not use metaphors. It's been my experience that racists, or rather, it's my conclusion, racists, they use metaphors, similes, comparisons between two entities that are not separate, although they will insist these are identical. They're nearly twins. They're the same thing. They will do this all the time. It causes confusion. That is master deception. It is an act of racism. Non-white people, we've been exposed to this sort of conduct for a long time. It influences our thinking. Also, many of us, Gus T Renegade included, we are still learning. We have not come to conclusions on some issues, which is fine. But sometimes when we are trying to articulate, converse with another non-white person, share our views, we have not come to a conclusion. Sometimes we're lacking logic to explain ourselves completely. So we will use a metaphor in its place, and I've just seen where consistently that can spread confusion. It does not adequately explain what you want to say. If we could be explicit, direct about what it is that we want to say, that would be super appreciated. I will prompt about the metaphors, just something we can be mindful about for this broadcast exclusively. Words are very important, as was stated with the Census piece. With that, number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press *61 if you would like to participate. That's it. We will get to the first few folks who dialed in with a hand up. If you have commentary, feel free.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, appreciate that. Peace to the callers, to the host, and to the platform. And today, I would just like to share a detailed observation that I've come to a conclusion about in the system of racism and white supremacy, and I just want to run it across the ears and minds and hearts of other victims of racism and white supremacy to see if they can answer these questions with any logic. Me personally, I specialize in the area of religion and spirituality, but the question that I pose to the victims of racism and white supremacy is, do you think that racist man, racist woman, and racist child are any type of deities or gods? Or I rephrase the question and I say, do you think that any white person or white people, white man, white woman, or white child are deities or gods? And I pose that question with a logical base behind it, but the answers that I think that come from the people will give us insight to maybe, what's going on in the system of racism and white supremacy as it concerns the area of religion and spirituality, as well as the other areas, and how are white people operating in this area. That's the question.
Okay. Well, I guess before if folks want to respond or share other thoughts that they have, what do you mean specifically when you say deity? What do you mean specifically when you say God?
Okay, what I mean by deity or God would be basically the common meaning to that phrase, which is like supposed to be an all-powerful being or something like that, or having some special powers over your life and death, as far as being the creator of all things, not an associate or a partner, but just like this supreme being, the creator of all things, or some type of being that has a special power that overrules any and everything you're supposed to be able to do, because they're supposed to be so special. And they're like beyond human, and you're less than human. And so the word deity and God, most people will have some kind of, definition for these words pertaining to their own particular spirituality and religion. And so the question that I'm posing again to what they believe or think is, do they think that a white person, or whether they want to call them racist man, woman, and child, or white man, woman, and child, do you think that they are any type of deities or gods, along with the creator that created anything, or are they the creator of everything? And then I think that we will get to some insight about how is racism and white supremacy operating in the area of religion.
Great. Thank you for explaining, sir. Folks want to answer as, you share other thoughts that you have. That'd be appreciated. I can give my quick response as you have explained it for us. No, I have never met or not aware of. There's no white male, white female, white child that I think is a deity, God, or as the way that you've explained it. I don't think they have any special powers, quote unquote. I think they have just figured out the logic. They are dedicated to abusing, terrorizing everyone that they classify as not white, especially black people. and they have just figured out the logic to go about doing that. Non-white people, black people, we can figure out the logic to put them out of business. I don't think they have any special powers. I don't think they are the creators of all or of the planet or creators of the universe, anything of that nature. Absolutely not. They are terrorists. They are practicing racism, white supremacy, and we can figure out the logic to put them out of business. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, you want to respond to the question, if you have a hand up, feel free.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings to you, Gus, to all the other callers and listeners. I must agree with you. I don't consider any white person any sort of deity. Actually, I consider them sub-animals. And when I use the term sub-animals, I'm looking at their behavior, and I would not insult the animal kingdom to even include them in the animal kingdom because their behavior is even lower than single-cell organisms as far as I'm concerned. The only thing that they've created, like Gus said, is a system of white supremacy, and that has to do with strict organization and logic around dominating non-white people. And I have always believed and will always know that there is a counter logic to that can replace white supremacy with justice. So definitely I did want to answer that. I did have some comments on the clips, but I thought that this was article that I found earlier this week was very important. So I want to read that, and hopefully I'll have enough time to address some of the clips, or maybe later. But this one is a CIA agent confesses on his deathbed that he killed Bob Marley. It says, 79-year-old retired officer CIA Bill Oxley has made a series of stunning confessions since he was admitted to Mercy Hospital in Maine on Monday. He has told he has weeks to live. He claims he committed 17 assassinations for the American government between 1974 and 1985, including the music icon Bob Marley. Mr. Oxley, who worked for the CIA for 29 years as an operative with top-level security clearances, claims he was often used as a hitman by the organization to assassinate individuals who could represent a threat to the goals of the agency. Trained as a sniper and marksman, Mr. Oxley also had significant experience with more unconventional methods of inflicting harm upon people, like poisons, explosives, induced heart attacks, and cancer. The 79-year-old operative claims he committed the assassinations between March 1974 and August 1985, at a time when he says the CIA was, quote, a law unto itself, unquote. He says he was part of an operative cell of 3 members which carried out political assassinations across the country and occasionally in foreign countries. Most of their victims were political activists, journalists, and union leaders, but he also confesses to assassinating a few scientists, medical researchers, artists, and musicians whose ideas and influence, quote, represented a threat to the interests of the United States, unquote. He claims he had no problem with going through with the assassination of Bob Marley because, quote, I was a patriot. I believed in the CIA and I didn't question the motivations of the agency. I've always understood that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good, unquote. But Mr. Oxley confesses that Bob Marley remains unique among his victims as he was the only victim he, quote unquote, felt anything for. Quote, the others were assholes. Bob Marley was Bob Marley. I was no closer to being a long-haired hippie back then than I am now, but I must admit Bob's music did move me. It held some power over me, unquote. He claims to have, quote unquote, mixed feelings about Bob Marley's death. On the one hand, Marley was a good man and a beautiful soul with profound artistic gifts who did not deserve to have his life cut short. But according to Mr. Oxley, Bob Marley was also placing the goals of the CIA in jeopardy and threatening the existence of the United States. One black man threatens an entire existence of a country. Quote, he was succeeding in creating a revolution that used music as a more powerful tool than bullets and bombs. Bob Marley in 1976 was a very serious threat to the global status quo and to the hidden power brokers implementing their plan for a new world order. As far as the agency was concerned, Bob Marley was too successful, too famous, too influential. A Jamaican Rastaman who started using his funds and fame to support causes around the world that were in direct conflict with the CIA. To be honest, he signed his own death warrant, unquote. Quote, it's not like we didn't warn him. We sent a few guys to shoot up his house in Kingston, unquote, Mr. Oxley says, referring to a shooting in the Marley residence that left the singer with an injured arm and chest. Quote, we had a message for him. We impressed upon him the gravity of the situation he found himself in. He didn't listen, unquote. 2 days later in the mountains, I stuck him with the pin, unquote. How Bob Marley was murdered by the CIA. 2 days after Bob Marley was shot in the arm by one of 3 gunmen who ambushed the singer and some of his crew in his house in Kingston, and after a brief stint in the hospital, Bob Marley traveled to the protective hills of Blue Mountains and spent time in the highest point in Jamaica rehearsing for an upcoming concert. According to Mr. Oxley, he used press credentials to gain access to Bob Marley during his Blue Mountain retreat. He introduced himself as a famous photographer working for the New York Times and gave Bob Marley a gift. Gifts from white people. Quote, I gave him a pair of Converse All-Star size 10. When he tried on the right shoe, he screamed, ouch. That was it. His life was over right there and then. The nail in the shoe was tainted with cancer, viruses, and bacteria. If it pierced his skin, which it did, it was good night, nurse, unquote. Quote, there had been a series of high-profile assassinations of counterculture figures in the United States in the late 60s and early 70s. By the time Bob Marley's time came around, we thought subtlety was the order of the day. No more bullets and splattered brains, unquote. Mr. Oxley said he kept close contact with Marley during the final years of his life, ensuring the medical advice he received in Paris, London, and the United States, quote, would hasten his demise rather than cure him, unquote. He died from cancer in May 1981. He was just 36 years old. Quote, the last time I saw Bob before he died, he had removed the locks. His weight was dropping like a stone, unquote, he says. He was very withdrawn, unbelievably small. He was shrinking in front of us. The cancer had done its job. The day he died in Miami, definitely one of the most difficult moments in my career. I felt real bad. For a long time, I wasn't comfortable with my part in his death, but I eventually came to realize it had to be done for America, unquote. I'll replace America with the system of white supremacy. I think I took my 5 minutes. Hopefully I'll get to chime in on the clips later. I'll give someone else the time to speak. But I think this speaks to the book that we're reading, The Wisdom of Psychopaths, how white people will set you up and follow and stalk you until you die, and they feel no remorse for what they do. I'll mute my line. Hopefully I'll get to chime in again later. Thank you.
Wow. Much obliged, Roz. I think John Patash, or not I think, that's in both of John Patash's books, Suspected Race Soldier. He's been on this program a couple times, but his theory that that's exactly what happened to Bob Marley. I think others had put forward a similar theory that this was someone who was making a counter-racist effort with music, with his art, who could have done a lot with regards to promoting justice and getting black people organized and operating in a more constructive manner. But I think he did say that he felt bad once Bob Marley passed away, and I think you said it as well. I just do not think that that's true. I don't see any evidence that white people feel bad. I think that's the question I've asked for years, Ta-Nehisi Coates, that white people are sincerely and greatly feel bad about what they have done, what they continue to do against black people, and I just don't think that that's accurate at all.
I had a quick question. Did you ever receive the article I sent you, that the scientific article that discussed the fact that white people have no empathy for brown people and non-white people?
Yes, sir.
I sent it to you. Okay, because that just, to me, speaks volumes to just what you're talking about. They don't care a darn about us. Don't be fooled. Thank you. I'm sorry. Hopefully I get to chime in later. I'll mute my line.
For sure. Other folks who chimed in, if you have a hand up, feel free.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir, Mr. Steele.
Awesome. I'm in some suburb here in Southern California. And I just wanted to chime in really quick regarding the story that was just read. I have to advise victims of racism to be very, 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 very careful about the sources with which they get their news from, because I just went ahead and Googled some of the words that were being used in or some of the phrases that were being read in the last story, and I came up to a thread of white supremacists who are talking amongst each other on a site called Reddit, and they go ahead and ask if this is a legitimate news site. And there's one post that seems to be very familiar with the source of this information called yournewswire.com. One post from a person called Global South, very interesting name. Global South says, more tripe from, quote, Dimitri Baxter, end quote, and one word, Your Newswire, -- a fake news site designed to deceive dupes into thinking it is coming from the Russians. This is a second-rate knockoff of the world-famous hoaxer Socher Fall and What Does It Mean, which is also one word. So, there's a long culture of people online making up fake stories of deathbed confessions of CIA operatives, and we need to be very, very careful not to take all of these reports at face value or not to believe them at all, and to always scrutinize the sources of information that we are putting out there. If we continue to use fake information, we put ourselves in a position to be susceptible to the type of intervention.
Are you still there, Mr. Steele? You cut out. It sounded like...
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You cut out when you were saying intervention. You cut out at the word intervention.
Yeah. These sort of interventions are used against us with fake news. If you recall, the Crips and the Bloods, their original nascent organizations were infiltrated, and the people were pit against one another by the utilization of fake news and propaganda. And that's, I think, what's going on heavy with this sort of story. Another center of false news that I'm noticing that is capturing the attention of a lot of victims out here is the false news, or is the news that is supposedly coming out of Libya and in West Africa in general. There are a number of images and video being used by the white supremacists to forward the idea that there is some sort of return to chattel slavery that is occurring in Libya, and just be very careful about some of those images because they may not be what they appear. They may not be what they appear, and in general, you just have to be really critical of any sort of information that you're getting out of Africa, especially if it's coming from the white supremacists or through a filter or an intermediary of the white supremacists, because honestly, there are a number of stories that, there are a number of videos that I'm just questioning the authenticity of, a number of accounts that are framing what is human migration and what is the same type of practice that you see going on at the border over here. It's framing that as some sort of chattel slavery, and it's just getting a lot of victims of racism very emotional and putting us in a position where we are asking the white supremacists to come back into Libya and come back into Africa to kind of clean up the mess and restore order or whatever, compared to the current state of affairs that they're framing as chattel slavery or slavery in general. So just be very, very mindful of fake news, the people who are spreading it, and the sources from which we're finding fake news. Always try to look for verified sources, and always try to corroborate your story with people that are actually there or on the ground. And I'll go ahead and mute my line at this time. Thank you so much.
Indeed, Mr. Steele. I think Dr. Rassan, he talked about that as well. Anytime if you check out something online, if it's a source with a report of any sort of information, to make an effort to triangulate to see how many other sites that you can find to confirm what it is you're looking at. But that the system of white supremacy, I said at the beginning of the broadcast, masters of deception, master deceivers. That is one thing that you can do to generate confusion, to make it difficult for people to ascertain, is this valid information? Is this accurate, or is this, as they're now saying, fake news? Other folks that dialed in with a hand up, if you have commentary and we haven't heard from you thus far, feel free.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello. This is Demetrius. My name is Demetrius from Lake Mary, Florida. So I know that we talked a little bit about the Haitians having their status affected and being told that they have to go back home, and I think that's interesting because, you know, I believe there were some Hondurans who were another group of non-whites who were beneficiaries of that temporary protected status program, and I guess I was kind of waiting for the Honduran community or people to kind of speak up on behalf of their fellow Haitians, but that never happened. And so, and so I want to give that as an example. And then another example I want to give is the situation that we're talking about with Libya, where they have black slaves, African slaves, and Libyans. I believe that's another group of non-whites. And so I kind of wonder, I mean, obviously we ultimately hold the system of white supremacy responsible for things that, for bad things that happen to us. But I mean, can non-whites ever be held responsible for any of their actions? I mean, should we hold them responsible as well? Should we hold other non-whites with a certain level of suspicion as well that we hold whites to? And I guess that's my question, if anyone wants to answer.
What do you mean? What do you mean when you say hold another non-white person responsible? Like what would have to be done to, quote unquote, hold that person responsible?
I think, for one, to simply call out the behavior, sort of like what I'm doing right now, to just say, you know, I brought this up on social media platforms, and I've talked to other people about this. And so I think anyone that identifies themselves as being a part of, let's say, the Honduran community or the Libyan community, I think, you know, people should go up to them and bring up the matter and say, well, you know, why are your people engaging in this type of behavior, knowing that we live in a system of white supremacy? Is that constructive? So you can't. I understand that you can't, as black people, as non-white people, it's hard to enforce things. But I think there should be accountability as far as at least bringing the issue up and asking questions and demanding an answer for why some of these things happen. I mean, that's the best we can do at the moment. Does that make more sense, or does it still sound confusing? Or?
No, I understand. That was the clarity that I was hoping to gain. Thank you. My response would be, I don't. It's logical what you're saying. I might substitute a few words. I don't make demands of other victims of racism because I don't have an army to enforce it. I can't even demand an answer. If someone chooses not to answer me, it's not a whole lot that I can do. I don't have, as I said, I don't have an army to make somebody respond. And the same thing with hold accountable. That's one that I've heard for many years. I think Mr. Fuller has talked about that. I am not in the business of, quote unquote, holding other non-white people accountable because, again, I don't have an army to come and enforce, these are going to be the consequences because you have not done, whatever you're supposed to do. So we're going to, quote unquote, hold you accountable. I don't have the means to do that. Now, if it's raising a question and just saying, hey, talking to individuals, Honduran people, and saying, hey, we have had a similar experience. Maybe we should be empathizing with what's happening to Haitian immigrants right now. Maybe we should try and offer some support. Maybe we should speak up about this situation because we've had a similar experience. That's great. There's no problem with that at all. And you can have a dialogue about that. I think that's great. And trying to have constructive conversation with other non-white people, that's encouraged. But if it's holding accountable in terms of I want to, because a lot of times when I hear that, it just becomes now I have justification to talk about other non-white people and things that I don't agree with that they're doing, or talking about, perceived errors, things that I perceive to be errors on their part. And in my view, if there's going to be any sort of critique about what someone is or is not doing that they shouldn't with regards to counter racism, you should start with yourself. I think that's the person that you know best in terms of, flaws and what you need to be working on. That's what I encourage as opposed, because I think a lot of non-white people, we spend a lot of time critiquing other victims, and that just can become sport. That can become a lot of fun to just nitpick and criticize other non-white people. It's easy to find flaws and errors that we're committing. If you want to do that, I do encourage talking to someone on a personal level, like what you were saying. If you know folks, speak to them individually and with a lot of Black self-respect. That might be constructive. In fact, I do encourage that. I think that would be great, but not as I'm holding you accountable, but just I'm trying to exchange views with other non-white people to see if we can do something that is constructive, maybe address some areas where we're not being constructive, or we could maybe reflect on, re-examine some of our views, some of our stances, how we're using our time and energy. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It does. Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. I do. Yeah.
Okay. One thing I was going to say as well, that word community, I've taken the position just based on counter-racist logic that the only community in the known universe is the white community, if there is a system of white supremacy. And I think racists, they demonstrate the logic of that all the time. You have a quote-unquote Haitian community in the United States, and now there's fear that you might not anymore have a Haitian community, that they might be getting kicked out. That's the system of white supremacy. If you have a community, you're not worried about being destabilized, gentrified, temporary protected status. You're not worried about any of that. You have all the resources that you need to protect, take care of yourselves, and everyone else who is a part of your community. I don't see Black people demonstrating that anywhere on the planet, unless I've been misinformed.
Absolutely, and I think I think I would definitely agree with that statement. You're right. Non-whites. You're right. The only real community is the white community. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Right on. Context of White Supremacy. If other folks dialed in, if you have a hand up, appreciate your commentary, sir. Florida. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, if we've not heard from you, feel free.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
This is Jason calling in from New York. I'm listening three separate pieces together. There was Mary Hamilton, the segment in the beginning. Meghan Markle, the woman who identifies as biracial, that's marrying into the royal family, and then the mention of Sammy Davis Jr. in the African Film Festival. I noticed with the clip that we heard regarding the woman, Meghan Markle, I believe her name is. I noticed that she, and just the things I've been hearing over the week, and that she claims biracial and intentionally does not describe herself as black. You see the media, white media, suppressing her black heritage and specifically saying biracial as well, and also minimizing her role that she'll have in marrying into this family or whatever is taking place with that. And that showed to me that people that do claim to be biracial but are known to have a black parent are still not accepted by white supremacists. And it seemed like this woman, just from her appearance and from her rhetoric, seemed like almost like she wanted to be white, and she is marrying to a white and white supremacist family as that at that. So it seemed like it's almost a higher level of victimization to the extent where she is sympathizing with white supremacists and trying to join that group almost. I mean, I don't know if it's going a little too far to say that, but it just seems like the victimization is very strong there. And on the flip side, Mary Hamilton, her being light-skinned, and she's seeing pictures of her, she's just about as light-skinned as the woman marrying into the family, and the fact that she could have passed as white, and her family did choose to pass as white, but she fully embraced her blackness and used her voice the way she did. I saw that as black self-respect in the way that she led her life and did what she did. And then in the woman and the interview regarding the African Film Festival, mentioned that there was a piece on Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was a performer, entertainer, and member of what was called the Rat Pack, and so the other members of the Rat Pack was Frank Sinatra and some others, and I'm sure Sammy Davis Jr. did other things as well. But in that group that he's most known for were other white people. Were white people. Sammy Davis Jr. is black, of course. But the woman mentioned that Sammy Davis Jr. had identity confusion and things like that around. I'm not sure if he. I know he had a Jewish identity as well, but hearing that and kind of putting all of these together leads me to believe that there's a desire for white supremacists to have people in those situations that are black and have black parents and want to confuse them as to where they stand and even make them believe that they might not be black or might have the benefits that white people do, just to suppress their blackness, so they do not pose a threat to white supremacists. That's something that I hadn't thought through too much, but the way that the clips were sequenced really, it kind of put that into perspective, that there's a way that the system of white supremacy and white supremacists themselves want people to see themselves and identify themselves. I'll go ahead and mute my line.
Interesting. Sammy Davis Jr., victim of white supremacy. I believe he also married a white female. Other folks who dialed in if they have commentary. And as a member of the Rat Pack, I know that he was subjected to a lot of racist jokes by the other, I think Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, Frank Sinatra. I think those are the suspected racist members, but I think that was a big part of their shtick, was to make racist fun of Sammy Davis Jr. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, if we've not heard from you, proceed.
Yes, can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is HV. Good evening to Gus and the rest of the callers. I called in a few months ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, about a almost 20-year friendship that I had with a suspected racist, which I consider a confirmed racist, and I asked for suggestions of questions that I could ask her to, I guess, more determine whether or not she's a racist. Would you happen to remember that, Gus?
I do remember the details. I don't recall what happened that prompted the questions. I don't remember all the details about it, but I remember, yes, this was your white friend of, a significant amount of time, and some of the anxiety that you were having about this tragic arrangement as it is.
Yeah, and I remember Ken Steele gave me some questions, retired firefighter, a lot of people, and I really appreciate that. Well, I'll just say that I ended that friendship rather quickly. It wasn't something that was difficult for me to end at all, because we had actually grown apart for a number of years for just different reasons. So that when I started to, I guess, talk to her more and more from a mind that was less confused, it was pretty much just the last straw in terms of just some things that she said. I don't remember all the questions that I asked her, but I do know that I didn't actually pay attention to a lot of what she said, because I just can't stand a racist, and I was already getting tired of her. But some things that I remember, I asked her if anyone ever suspected her of being a racist, and she said yes. I can't remember the reason that she gave. She did a lot of times play the victim and say that people were racist toward her. I did ask her, should victims be, I didn't say victims, but, should non-white people be suspicious of white people? And she said no, that they shouldn't automatically have that mindset toward them and things of that nature. I'm trying to think if it was, one statement that she made that really disgusted me. She said, she said a lot of very interesting things. She said that Mexicans have, they have cockroaches, and other statements that she's made, that she said, I think it was her nephew said that black people stink, and her response to that was that, or her take on that is that some of us do. Now, it's very interesting. Some people say white people smell like wet dog or something like that, and I don't be getting into all of that. So it's very interesting that she would take that position. And then her ex-husband said that he particularly liked, he's married, supposedly now he's actually married to a black woman, but when he was married to her, something about he particularly liked white women. I think something about, I want to say the texture of their hair or something. And she was just telling me the things that he said he liked that was, in comparison. And it was almost like she was agreeing, and she made a statement, too, about how he said to her when their divorce was coming up, something about he's going to get him a black woman with long hair. And her response was, good luck with that. And I'm going to just quickly say something about that it's actually a lot of, black women who have long hair. So this idea that's so rare, it's really not. But I mean, again, just to even kind of go there, really just kind of showed me the type of, I guess, mentality that she has. So if anyone who remembers any of the questions that I was supposed to ask or anything like that, if you want to ask me, maybe that'll jog my memory. Like, hey, did you ask her this? And, maybe I could tell you, what she said, but I don't really remember all the questions that I asked, and might even be getting close to my 5 minutes anyway. But, that's all I had, and thank you for allowing me to share, and I'll mute my line.
That is grand. I'm happy that you were able to dissolve and move forward. That's great. Do you have any other white friends?
I would say no. There is someone who I used to occasionally go out to eat with, but we were never really close, and she's like really old. She's like in her 60s. I'm like half her age, and I actually haven't talked to her in a very long time. So, and it's so weird because she got some mentalities too, and she's knowing, my views about racism and things of that nature, and I haven't really heard from her, and I haven't tried to reach out to her either. And so, like, if I had to, I guess, officially end whatever it was that we had, that also wouldn't be difficult. But actually, I just remembered something. I actually didn't tell, I'm talking loud, sorry. I actually didn't tell my former friend of almost 20 years that she's a racist to me. What I told her was that I ended our friendship because, we had just grown apart and I was tired of forcing it, and that is the truth. The racist part was really just an excuse, and not the excuse, it was the last straw, and if anything, it just kind of accelerated something that was already going to happen and already made sense. And my thinking behind that was, in not telling that extra part, was that I actually didn't want to give her, stuff to kind of refine her racism, because even when she told me that someone suspected her of being a racist, she said, how can I be racist? My son is black or something like that, because as I told you, her ex-husband is black, and actually, yeah, her ex-husband is black, but she actually didn't have a child by him. She's actually in another relationship with another black man who she's gonna supposedly marry or may marry, and they have a child together. So I actually wanted to know what you and the other callers thought about that. Like, should I have told her, hey, you're a racist and this is why?
I think that's, your prerogative, the logic that you used in terms of not wanting to help her refine her racism and how she presents to other black people, particularly if she encounters another black person who's less confused. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I've heard other people who said that they also refrain from sharing certain information or their views or telling a white person all of their thoughts because they don't want them to refine their white supremacist code. So to me, that makes a lot of sense. I have no problem with that at all, that very logical course of action. Other folks that we've not heard from, if you want to share your thoughts, if you want to give your answer with regards to how did you want to be referenced, ma'am?
HV or highly victimized?
HV, highly victimized. Got it. If you want to give a response to HV, whether or not she should have told her ex-friend that she was indeed a racist white supremacist, you can share that as well. Folks we've not heard from at all, if you have commentary, proceed.
You heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Greetings to you, the host, the callers, and the listeners. This is Mhandisi. I would say to highly victimized, my response is all people, the people who are classified as white, the ICE albinos, they're all white supremacists. They all kill people. They all kill black people. They all are currently killing black people. All of them. Even the babies that are here, the newer form of, or the newer arrivals of the invasion. They're all the enemy. So there's not going to be any good white people. And I heard Mr. Neely Fuller, this week that just passed on his broadcast, he was, I guess, challenging people to define what good is. And perhaps I'm not going to do that, but I would just say these are people who are killing us. So, they're that people. That's who they are. They have to go. And then the other thing I would say, just on Mr. Fuller's broadcast, I heard there was two emails that was sent to the broadcast that was basically asking a question of if are black people able to exist on this planet with white people, ICE albinos on the planet also. And Mr. Fuller, what I gathered was it seemed like Mr. Fuller was saying maybe not, but we have to determine whether we can exist with white people on the planet. And if we figure out that white people cannot exist with us on the planet peacefully, then we would have to deal with that information for what it is. And I think he was saying, and then act on whatever we decide that we should do with that. And I would just say, it sounded like what he was saying was, okay, what we should do is we should use a short period of time to do everything possible to get along with white people here on the planet. And after that period of time that we've decided that there's no possible way to get along with white people, ICE albinos, the creature, that then we would have to decide, well, what do we do about not being able to exist with white people on the planet? And I would just say, okay, so what's the time frame? Are we talking about, just forever and ever? Are we talking about a year? Like, how about we just spend 2018, doing everything we can to determine, can we live with these people on this planet, this creature on this planet, white people, ICE albinos? Can we live with them on this planet? And if we decide after 2018 that we cannot, then we need to make a decision. I would love for that. And I would like to ask Mr. Fuller what his thoughts are on that. And that's my contribution. Thank you.
Indeed. That's one always think context is important. It's not like we've been having this difficulty with individuals classified as white for a week or 2 years. This has been a problem for years and years, centuries. That should be taken into account when we do our processing. Other folks that we've not heard from at all, if you have commentary, proceed. Do we nab everybody? Everybody who has anybody that we missed completely who has a hand up?
Hey, Gus, Thomas, can you give me a few minutes, please?
Yes, sir. Give him a sec. Anybody else that we missed? Greetings. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Greetings to Gus, the host, the listeners and callers. I do remember that caller, and if I can recall, I think one of the questions I recommend that she should ask about is the culture of racist jokes. Like, does she engage in making racist jokes, or does any white associate she has make racist jokes, and does she laugh at them or is in agreement with them? Like, I think that line of questioning will really bring about some revelation about her racist mentality. And like, that's the main point that I made, and like what I recommended she should ask, because I know, well, the white people that I know of, or work with or whatever, that pattern is very consistent, where they're making these racist jokes. Okay, so that's definitely part of their culture. But as far as the segment on the I think the non-white female that was, I guess, engaged to the I think that's Prince Harry or something like that. Like, what I noticed is another example of when I don't know what was the term that did Dr. Wilson come up with, the contrast programming? Is that kind of like what that is? Is that an example of that, Gus?
Dr. Welsing did talk about contrast programming, where they'll, I've heard her use it, where they'll put up an image of a black person who's eating really unhealthy food and is overweight, and then they'll put up an image right after that. Immediately, they'll put up an image of a white person who's really fit and eating healthy food, like contrast programming, to just really try to make you think that, oh my goodness, there's an extraordinary difference between whites, black people, and to really try to accent that black people are super defective, deficient. In what sense were you thinking contrast programming was happening in that segment on Prince Harry and this quote unquote interracial arrangement?
Well, that's thank you for that clarification of that term. I think it might not have been explained in that exact way, like, comparing a white person, a non-white person, but the way, like, from the report that I seen earlier this week, they was talking about, this the engagement, and it's being big news over there in the UK, and then immediately after that, they showed that I think that's the older brother is about to have a third child. Okay, so I know Mr. Fuller and Dr. Wilson, as they were talking about the like how racists, they really stay focused on the area 8 and reproduction. Like how they're having a decline in birth rate and the fertility issues. So that was interesting that, they pushed that out there, like, immediately on this local news report that I was watching. It said, hey, I think, I don't know, Prince William or something, I don't know what the other brother name is, the older one, says, he's about to have his third child. And I think they really wanted to push the, white man, white woman, white child, that family unit, racist family unit. So I thought that was very revealing on that news report. And it was like a coded message to the white collective, like, don't worry about this too much. We got to hold up the deception, or we got to be more deceptive to non-white people and make it seem like we don't have any racism anymore. There was a commercial that I had seen. I think a lot of people probably have seen it on here. It's a Toyota commercial, and I think it was the message that it sent definitely dominated by racism. It was a white guy who walks up to the vehicle, and he was just flailing his arms around and just being very spontaneous and acting as though he's in a hostile confrontation with two white people that are in the Toyota vehicle, and there are two black males watching from a distance, saying, oh, he's going to really give it to him now. So basically pandering to that stereotype that black people are prone to conflict and violence and wanting to fight each other and wanting to see fighting and stuff like that, while he was just over there having a totally different conversation. Like, is this vehicle, like, what's the mileage on this vehicle? And really, how long? I didn't know this was out, and how fast can it go? And, where can I go buy it? A very, I guess, friendly conversation, and then he looks up and he says, can you believe this guy? And then the black male says, he's giving it to him, isn't he? And then the other one says, mm-hmm. So I don't know if anybody's seen that commercial, but that is like a large amount of racism that's in that advertisement. And that's all I wanted to share right now, and thanks for allowing me to speak.
I have not seen that commercial. If I can track it down on YouTube or something, I'll have to check it out. If somebody else can locate it, if you want to post it on my Facebook page or tweet it to me, I would appreciate it. Much obliged. HV, I guess, if you're there, did you get a chance to ask your former racist friend about the racist jokes?
I did. She said that she does not, because he also asked me to ask her, I believe, if she does laugh what makes her any different. And I don't think I asked her that, but I did ask her about the jokes, and she said that she laughs, but she does not laugh when the jokes are about black people, but when they are about other non-white people, she laughs, or she has, or something like that.
Did you ask if she could remember any of the racist jokes that she's heard? Is she be willing to share any of them?
I believe I don't believe she's ever told me. I don't believe I asked her that. I think if anything, I just asked her what types of things do they say about us when we're not around. What types of stuff.
How did she answer that?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what types of, because she did tell me what types of things they talk about. I'm not even sure if she told me that. I think she just told me the groups like Mexicans and us and black people. I'll keep thinking as the broadcast goes on and tell you if I remember if she told me what types of stuff they say, because I want to say that she did, and I shared that previously, but right now at the moment I can't remember if that is true.
Oh, okay. Well, you can think on it. Take your time. Other folks, if you all, any of the other folks who, if you remember, if you suggested a question that she should ask, HV should ask, if you want to share and see if she can recall her, if she got a response, the number is 641-715-3640, and the code is 564-943#. Press star. Oh, yes, sir. Thomas in New York.
Did she say that this person is in a tragic arrangement, or has a child from a tragic arrangement?
Yes, I did. And actually, I just remember one thing that she did say, that her family members didn't want her to be, I believe, with a black man because they're abusive, which is so crazy because the majority of domestic abusers, or at least people who are accused of that, are white. But yes, she was married to a black man, and now she's in a relationship with another one who she plans to marry, and they have a son. They have a son together.
Got it. So my question would be, if she's aware that there is a system of racism and white supremacy, and I'm quite sure she would say yes, then my question would be, well, why would you bring a black child into the world knowing that your people are going to mistreat that child? Do you think that is an act of selfishness?
Yeah, that's a great question.
No, always good.
Also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you can, to write them down, it seems like she might, or hopefully she won't be having further contact. I think she said this has been, the friendship has been dissolved, but it's always good to have questions at the ready for the next whites, the next racists. But you were saying, Thomas, in New York?
Yes, sir. I was also going to add my pedophilia tidbit, but I guess that would be a long question to ask. So I did have a comment to make, though. I was about to use a metaphor. I've been questioning one of Millie Fuller's principles myself, and I believe the first time I met Roz, we had this discussion, and we both disagreed with the fact that he would say there's white people and there's white supremacy, and I never got the logic behind that until this week, and thanks to Mr. Tariq Nasheed, who had he was interviewed by Fox News, and she asked him, "Well, do you think all white people are racist?" He says, she asked him a question along that line, and he says, "No, there's white people and there's white supremacists." And I it never made sense to it. Like, I think he makes a lot of the references for for when you're engaging with one of them. It's not for our general conversations with each other. Because it put her in a position where if she had no, because you could see she was trying to set him up by asking that question, and that ended that, so she had to reroute her questioning. And I just thought that was a very logical way to present it. When if one of us are asked, if we think all whites, so that way you're not putting yourself on a spot, you say, no, I mean, there's white people and there's white supremacists. Now you put them in the box where are you, which one are you? I can't tell them apart. So, I don't know, that's just how I thought about it. I saw a report this week, and I've been seeing this because I put Black identity extremists in my news feed, and I get clips, news articles, whatever, just written about it on the internet. And I've seen about 5 or 6 clips with different Black organizations, be it the National Black Caucus or the Black Cops or different fraternal Black orders, things of that nature, have met with the FBI director to discuss the BIE, but all of these reports say, they're going to meet today to discuss Black identity extremism, and you never see a follow-up to any of that. So I just want to know if you've seen anything where they've gotten any clarification on this, or, what exactly has gone on in any of these meetings. Because there's never a follow-up article that says, okay, they met with them yesterday, and this is what was said, and this is what's going to be done. So I just thought that was interesting as well. I didn't get a chance to check out any of the clips this week because I was traveling, and the week in the trains act very strange, so I had to leave very early, and underground I couldn't get any signal. I did have other comments, but I'll let others talk, and I'll mute my line. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Thomas in New York. I think Mr. Fuller, the logic in terms of why he has stated that for years, that's exactly why I think he's done enough counter-racist study to see that it can be advantageous to make sure when you're in discussions to not have someone try to trap you into saying, oh, well, you said all white people are racist and you can't prove it. I've heard him explain that explicitly for that reason. There's a lot of utility with regards to why he takes that position, even though I have come to a different conclusion about what it means to be white. But there's a lot of utility with regards to why he has put that aspect of the code together. White supremacists. Did we miss anybody completely? Anybody that we've not heard from at all who has a hand up? Grand. Okay. If you do think you have a comment, if we haven't heard from you, if you have a question, comment, you want to respond, there were a few questions that were asked. Make sure you get your hand up now. Please do not wait till the last minute to decide that you have a comment that you want to share. We have about 30 minutes, a little less. Just go ahead and get your hand up now if you think you have something that you would like to contribute to the discussion. Any of the other folks who dialed in with a hand up, if you have additional comments or questions that you want to add, feel free.
Yes, can I be heard?
Yes, HV.
Yeah, I thought that the call is that everyone would probably want to hear this. A question that I asked her that just kind of came to my mind on its own. I don't think it was a suggestion from anyone. She used to tell me a lot about the struggles that she would have with being in the current relationship that she's in, like a lot of struggles he had with getting employment and things of that nature. And so I asked her straight out. I said, why don't you just get a white dude and then you don't have to worry about none of that? And I said, is it that black men, they gravitate toward you and white men really don't? And she admitted, yes, that ultimately what it boils down to is that white men are not attracted to her. So that's why she, prefers black men. There was a time where she preferred Mexican men, and the reason could be, or Spanish-speaking men, the reason could be that they, gravitated toward her as well. I don't remember if we, discussed that being the reason or not, but I do know that her gravitation toward black men is because of their gravitation toward her and the lack of gravitation from white men toward her.
We have discussed that before. Pam has talked about that in her book. I think we've had some whites on the program, white females on the program who follow that pattern exactly for a myriad of reasons, where it's just easier for them to practice racism in that regard. And Area 8, this is not one of our focuses for the compensatory call-in. I know people generally are very enthused about that subject. That is not supposed to be one that we're focusing a lot of time on for the compensatory call-in. Other folks have comments. Any other folks have comments or questions that they wanted to get in?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I wanted to speak on some of the clips, but I did want to say I totally agree with what Ken Steele said, because I did triangulate the article. And besides that, I've been reading about Bob Marley's life since I was probably about 15, 16 years old. And from multiple sources, I've heard the same thing, that he was killed by the CIA, and he was killed with this nail. So just from the information I gathered throughout my life history, in addition to trying to triangulate these articles, because you're right, there's so much misinformation that's out there, so you have to be very, very, very studious and very skeptical. So I always like to advise caution. But yeah, I totally agree. So I did want to say that. Say that it did coincide with just the history of what I know to have happened to him long before. I believe also in Carl Evans' book, The Judas Factor, The Plot to Kill Malcolm X, he also speaks about the death of Bob Marley quite explicitly too. So yeah, just want to touch on that. But first I want to speak on the Meghan Markle and Prince Harry clip. It's interesting. I agree with everything everyone said in regards to this situation, this tragic arrangement as it's developing. Meghan hasn't done her research. If she looks in the history of Harry himself, he's worn a Nazi outfit to a Halloween party. He's made racist statements publicly that he had to recant multiple times. This is a staunch white supremacist that she's getting married to. His grandmother was saluting Hitler at 4 years old in the early 19th century. Prince Edward, who was one of the people raising the Queen herself, who was photographed hailing Hitler, he was also a Nazi, and he was trying to usurp the throne of England by working with the Germans and the Nazis against his own people. So this is a Nazi-embedded family that she's now marrying into, and she thinks that there's something, wonderful and special about this situation. But I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to show her better than we can tell her. And it's just really, really just disgusting and tragic to even think about. I really like the clip on Mrs. Mary Hamilton. I just loved her Black self-respect, especially just demanding to be addressed by proper honorific titles, just like a white female in court. I thought that was just great, because these are things that seem small, but they're very, very significant just in regards to shaping the way Black people are viewed and our humanity and things of that nature. So I think that just that whole story was just quite compelling. There's too much to really speak on it, but it was just really, really powerful. I thought the clip on the on Haitian deportation, the Black politician that was addressing Trump's racist regime's actions against Haitians, I thought he had a great coded way of speaking about his racism without calling him racist to be put on the spot in the way that you and Thomas in New York were just speaking about. And I do remember that conversation when Thomas and I did meet. And that's exactly what I said. I said, I think that code exists for when you're speaking publicly about white people. I know all white people are racist. I don't need anybody to tell me that. Life experience says it. But when speaking out, especially publicly, or especially anywhere where whites are within earshot and might be able to use that against you, that is the best way of speaking about them. And since only white people can be racist, without putting yourself in a position where they can misuse your words or mistreat you based on what you say. So I thought that was great that Thomas talked about that. John Conyers, the senator, congressman, I just think it's just interesting. I really think of him And I think of Bill Cosby. If you know Bill Cosby's history, he was very, very good friends with Hugh Hefner. And if what he did was what they're alleging he has done is true, a lot of it, and this is something I've heard from many sources, he learned from Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner was notorious for drugging and raping females all the time. And I'm sure that John Conyers, being a politician, learned what he was doing from more powerful white people. The sad part is because Mr. Cosby and Mr. Conyers and other black males who choose to live life like them do, they become confused and think they can do the things that white men can do, and there's going to be no repercussions until things like this happen. So understanding we're in a system of white supremacy, we should have impeccable character. That is a major, major way that we can avoid getting into situations that can set us up for just being severely mistreated, abused, and just furthering the system of white supremacy. I just think that that's very, very important. I think that the clip that you played where they were talking about white people who did not like pictures that were misaligned or standout geometric patterns and their proficiency or basically proclivity towards racism, white supremacy as far as their expressed behavior. I just think that is just a small test in the way in which it's a reverse psychology thing, where they're the abnormal ones. So to normalize themselves, they have to make anyone that doesn't look like them the object of their racist scorn. Whereas the reality is they're the ones that are abnormal and stand out because they're the global minority. So again, it's just white supremacy, and it's just in a reversed and perverted form in which you can maybe use that test as a benchmark to see who's more overtly white supremacists versus the more refined white supremacists as far as that's concerned. And I think that's all I have for all of the clips. But great program this evening. Thank you, and I'll mute my line.
Appreciate that, Roz. The caller at 5771. Did you have commentary? 5771.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Greetings, Gus, and greetings to all the callers and listeners. Real quickly, in the clip about the Haitians being sent back to Haiti, the politician that was speaking in regards to the travel warning going to Haiti, I guess the State Department had issued a travel warning for people going to Haiti. I pulled it up online and I was reading it because earlier this year, me and my wife took a trip to Haiti. Spent about 5 days there, and I was just reading this and was kind of interested on why they don't want people to go to Haiti, because they talk about the rates of kidnapping and murder rose in 2016, and I know there's that type of stuff everywhere, but not one day we kind of felt threatened by the Haitian people. And we stayed in Port-au-Prince. We didn't stay in a resort. We actually didn't even stay in a hotel. So we didn't feel like our lives were threatened. And one of the things that it said in the travel warning was, be cautious when visiting banks and ATMs, for they are targeted by criminals. Now, we only walked into 2 banks in Haiti to exchange our money. And I'm telling you, they have armed guards with not guns. They have rifles. And I'm pretty sure these institutions are not owned by Haitians, so that's why they have these guards. But logically, it does not make any sense for any criminals to, stick up a bank in Haiti because of the fact that they have armed guards with rifles, and I mean multiple ones. So this was, I'm looking at this and I'm just kind of like flabbergasted. And now here's another thing too, because I talked to a white woman on the plane to Haiti, and she says she takes a trip there every year to Haiti because her and her husband were married in Haiti. And needless to say, half of the people on the plane were white people. So I always get suspicious when white people say don't go to a particular country, but white people go there anyway. So I'm pretty sure that they're currently there stealing resources and doing whatever they need to do to maintain white supremacy there. So that's all I wanted to add. I'll mute my line.
Fascinating. I think other people have noted that as well. When they tell you, make sure you don't go to the continent. They got, Ebola squared and HIV and everything else you can imagine, but they, are there constantly. Same pattern worldwide. Did anybody else that we missed completely?
Can I say something?
Yes, sir.
All right, Gus. Yeah. Wow, that was interesting. There's a television show that comes on that they have these people who come from other countries, and they have to marry an American, and I think they either move to America for 90 days, and or they move to the other country, the American, for 90 days to be with that person. And they have a Haitian girl, and the white man, he wants to marry her, but she's, pretty much a prostitute because she has several other white men, at least one, but I have a feeling that it's more than one, that she also has the same arrangement with. And just want to say that that's commonplace on the island. They go there to sexually sewer these people, and still the precious resource of time and energy from them is what I think they're going over there to do. As for the prince, I wonder if it was the older son, if this would be acceptable. Not saying that it's 100% acceptable, but they're not stopping this marriage. But also, this son isn't one that's going to inherit any real power. As far as he's not in line to be the king. His brother is. So therefore, this lady's not going to be the queen consort. She's just going to have a title of duchess or something, but she's not going to really be a real person, a real power player in their coat of arms structure, their house structure that they have over there. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. And just to offer a little VGQ here, I've been watching what's going on throughout the continent of Africa. And we should call that Area A, because it's a total disaster right now. And I know that white people are most to blame. However, a lot of what I'm seeing being done is being done by non-white people. And I would like to know, what would it take for the Africans to, in the sub-Saharan areas, the black Africans, to go to Libya and free their brothers and sisters? It's like it's not even a thought there. And I understand they have their own things they're dealing with, but it just sounds like, I just would like to think, and I'm not 100% sure what would happen, but if they had a slave trade taking place publicly in Los Angeles, that brothers from Chicago, New York, and other places would be trying to get in their cars or trains and planes to go over there and at least voice their opinion about this, if not to try to free them. And I don't see any of that going on the continent at all that I've seen. And I just find that to be very odd, because all of those countries do have a military. They do have tanks and guns. It's not like us. We're totally unarmed. And I'll be my line. Thank you.
My response would be, I know Hurricane Katrina happened in most of our lifetimes. I don't think we have too many toddlers on the line where you had thousands of black people suffering. And I don't remember armies of black people in tanks rolling into New Orleans to save the day. I remember black people suffering for weeks or at least days on end in Louisiana. And I think there have been a number of other incidents worldwide where the system of white supremacy and at least for right now, the weak position that we are in, apparently we do not have the resources to carry out that sort of operation. And the other thing that I was thinking is, what if racist white supremacists say that we're not allowing that sort of operation? If, several different quote unquote African nations decide that they want to gather resources and have troops and send them to Libya or any place else where black people are being mistreated, who's to say that racists don't say, no, we do not allow you to send an army there. We didn't give you permission to do that. And no, and if you try to do it, we do have the means to enforce accountability. If you do something and we've told you not to do it, they do have that power. So that is something that I thought of. But it just seems to me that we're in a pretty weak position right now. That's what we're supposed to be working to change. But I think that's why we haven't seen that sort of mobilization. I could be in error. Other folks?
You're absolutely right, Gus, and that's why I worded it like, I mean, it's a thought. However, under the present conditions throughout the continent, there's several organizations that's hiring mercenaries. I mean, the number one place to hire mercenaries in the world is Uganda. I mean, these are trained soldiers there, and I understand that whites gave permission, but no one gave them permission to take America. They decided one day that they were going to do it, and they did it, and they were going to deal with the repercussions or so. And I just think that looking at the sites that I see, and then again, that they probably don't even know this is happening based off of white supremacy. They don't control the media. But this seems so drastic to me that it would have to instill something in their hearts to want to at least voice their opinion. I don't hear any of their presidents saying anything. I'll mute my line, Gus. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Before I get the other folks, I know I heard Roz as well. I did want to say briefly, they were talking about the situation with Tom McBroom. This is the race soldier. He's an enforcement official who tweeted out the nasty commentary after they gave a settlement to Philando Castile's partner. I think she got like $800,000 or whatever, some pitiful sum to Diamond Reynolds. But he tweeted out that she was going to have all that spent on crack cocaine. They said that they referenced that as a quote unquote insensitive tweet. And just wording, that is not a insensitive tweet. In my view, that is a racist comment, but again, just minimizing the language when these sorts of incidents happen. I also thought it was important when they were talking about the census, that they said at least since 1940 that there's evidence that it has been continued, consistent overcounting of individuals classified as white and then undercounting of non-white people. I thought that was important. I'd seen that reported several times before, where people thought that they were deliberately undercounting black people in the census, but to have a census representative come on and say that this is something that's been happening for a long time, I thought that was really important, because I think that they do use that data sometimes for funding and how they're going to allocate resources in certain areas. I was almost curious to hear what Dr. Welsing would say about that and them consistently overcounting the number of whites in this part of the world, what that actually means for their true numbers. Anyway, I know Roz and other folks, do we have any other folks that wanted to get commentary in the last 10 minutes or so?
Yes. Yeah, I was saying the same thing. The numbers are definitely not what they're saying. They've been, I think, reducing the numbers of non-white, especially black people in this country, and bolstering their own numbers. So yeah, I agree with you, and I would have loved to get her take on that. I wanted to say in reference to Africa, they've got some of the greatest examples of what will happen to anybody who even has an opinion that is counter to the white supremacist model. I mean, one of the greatest examples is Patrice Lumumba. And beyond that, I just actually saw a movie that stars David Oyelowo called United Kingdom. And it's about a African king by the name of Kama, who married a white female when he was getting educated in England. And just to watch that, you will see the dynamic of white supremacy and how it reigns even over a paramount African king of what is now known as modern-day Botswana. He had no control over his entire kingdom. He had to ask and answer to white people for everything. And I remember one scene he went to meet with them, and he brought his white wife with him, who was a lowly secretary in England, who he was just forget the relationship aspect. So when they came in, they said, we'd like to offer you an alcoholic beverage to his wife. And then they turned to him and said, King Kama, you know that it's illegal for an African to have alcohol. And they refused him, but offered his white wife the alcohol. So then his wife said, well, if my husband cannot have, is going to drink lemonade, then I'll have a lemonade too. So just that movie alone, I think, is some of the greatest dynamics of how white supremacy is operating right now on the continent. There's very, very few leaders or any, I think none, of integrity to the point where they would take any of the stances that a Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, or any of these people would have back then. And on top of that, I think a major reason that we cannot get the response from African leadership that we're looking for is because none of them have nuclear capabilities. I think if at least one African country had nuclear capabilities, then it would give the impetus for others to be able to speak, because if you're in positive relations with that country that has nuclear technology, then there's only so much they can do that you can't respond to with the most powerful force necessary, which is what they have, all of the white powers have against the African continent. So I think there's many circumstances. I don't blame them, just like I don't blame people here. We're all in the same position. The idea is if some of us can get a critical mass to understand who and what we're dealing with and change our behavior collectively. I mean, even in the Caribbean, we still answer to Britain too. You have the Privy Council in Jamaica. They can't do anything without talking to Britain first. So we still have the white parents there, or the white adults, the metaphor. We still have the white supremacist powers that have been dominating us, still dominating us, with black people that are placed to look at us in the face every day and call them our rulers in the African continent or the Caribbean. So, yeah, we just have to really take a holistic look and really work hard towards shifting the consciousness globally of all non-white people to understand who and what we're dealing with, and really start a mass collective nonviolent non-participation in the system, just like Neely Fuller and Dr. Welsing and all the people we revere talked about. Thank you. I'll mute my line.
Appreciate that. Do we have any other folks who had brief comments they wanted to get in before we get ready to conclude?
One last thing about the white numbers, Gus. The number of whites, and I heard someone say this on YouTube. They said that when a white woman has a black baby, that baby goes down in the system as being white. Even if it's not on the birth certificate, that's what it goes down in the system. So I spoke to a person I know who has a white wife and mixed children, and he said he has 2 mixed children, and one actually has white on the birth certificate, the other one has black. So I said, man, I wonder what the system says. So I waited, and finally the other day, a white woman came in with a black man, and they was pushing her in a wheelchair. She was pregnant. So I waited because in the hospital they play that lullaby music when a baby's born. I waited to hear that music, and I went up there with with my broom and stuff, and I went over and I started talking to the nurse, and I looked at the paper, and that baby is white. And I'll mute my line.
Fascinating. Racial classification confusion, the most important thing to keep in mind. The most powerful whites, they decide racial classifications, who gets to be classified as white, who's going to be classified as not white, and they can change that to their benefit as needed.
I'm not talking about the classification. I'm talking about that goes down in the census as a white person. Like, of course, that baby's not white, but with their booster in their numbers, all these mixed race kids are going down as white.
Right. Understood. Well, I guess I'll clarify then. Even if we're just talking about what they put in the census records or any other data that they're keeping about racial classification, they're going to be controlling those as well. And then in person, in terms of who they say gets to be accepted as white, obviously they're going to be in control of that aspect as well. Do we have anybody else who had commentary that they wanted to share?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of chime back in based upon some responses that I heard, and I kind of heard that basically the white people were not any type of deities or gods, and so that's fine. Constructively, I think that's moving forward in the conversation. And then logically, I reach a point where we come to a crossroad in the conversation, or not to say that. Basically, if I can say that about the white people, when I pose that same question to black people about blacks, the answer that I get from the black people, from my observation, is either going to be the solution to their problem or going to be their problem. Because if I ask you, is a black man, woman, and child deities and gods, and then you give me some kind of answer, based upon your answer, logically, at some point, since we have identified that white man, woman, and child are not gods and deities, I would then have to ask, or know, or examine, or truthfully say that these people are not gods as well, or give them some kind of classification or clarification that something makes them gods and deities because they're black. And then I think once the black people get this figured out, then you can start to get this power dynamic into shape. Because if you think these white people are gods and deities, or you think black people are gods and deities, and then maybe you don't understand gods and deities or God or the deity or whatever, then how can you ever deal with your system of racism, white supremacy that we wailing and crying about so much? And then this, I think we should take seriously and not joke about. Although every person has their own personal beliefs and thoughts, but if black people turn away from each other and we're supposed to be having a conversation to actually get out of a system of racism, white supremacy, but we throw that behind our backs, I don't logically see how all of us will make it. But to put it on the table for discussion is good. Because there are black people out there that are in the midst of us right now, whether we believe it or not, that do promote that ideology. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, or whether you believe you are atheist or whatever.
We'll leave it there.
Black people.
Thank you. We're right at the close of the program. I did hear a few metaphors at the close. Put it on the table and put it behind our back. We still want to be mindful of the words we're using on the compensatory call-in. This is the one broadcast exclusively that I do request that we cannot use metaphors. Words are very important. With that, we will be here tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We should have a suspected racist, Alfred McCoy. He's written several books. Again, I wanted to talk. That was the invitation, was to talk about the book that he wrote about heroin. But he wrote a new book that just came out about the decline of the American empire, as he calls it. So he wanted to switch to talk about that. I was disappointed because it's just a very different focus. Again, same thing I said before, that he's not even identifying which people specifically he thinks are losing power. But hopefully we'll get that addressed tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We should also be here this coming Tuesday. Again, resources for expecting black mothers. Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. If you have questions, gripes, guest suggestions, feel free to drop an email, untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. Thanks to all the folks who participated. I hope it was a constructive investment of your Saturday evening. And again, we'll be here in about 24 hours. I will encourage folks. I know it's the season for holiday parties and all the types of get-togethers and what have you. Sobriety would be best. If you have to attend, remain sober. If you're just going to be out and about gallivanting on your own, sobriety would be best. If you have to consume, I would encourage get to one spot and stay there. You certainly do not want to be intoxicated in the presence of whites, race soldiers. That is an extraordinarily dangerous proposition. Lots of evidence of that. Even around a lot of non-white people, that can be a dangerous proposition. I think we already have enough problems. I think it would be in our best interest to promote taking care of our brain computers and our overall health as best we can in an incredibly toxic environment, so that we can crank out solutions to the problem. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. If you're going to be out and about in a vehicle, buckle up, especially. Let's do everything that we can to minimize contact with race soldiers. Buckle up if you're a driver or even a passenger. With that, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people. victims of white supremacy, we ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cows signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.